contract with the Blues. For the next 2 years, Alex will work as special assistant to the general manager, Doug Armstrong. 2 years from now, following the 25-26 season, Alex will become the general manager of the St. Louis Blues. In addition, Doug's contract has been extended. It had 2 years remaining, and it has been extended an additional 3 years. Doug will serve the next 2 years as president of hockey operations and general manager, and then the following three years as president of hockey operations. As general manager, Alex will report to Doug as president for the 3 remaining years of both contracts. Over time, Doug will delegate GM duties to Alex, with Alex ultimately taking on all GM responsibilities.
It's what it sounded like earlier today as the St. Louis Blues and Chairman Tom Stillman announced that the next general manager of the St. Louis Blues will be Alex Steen. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN, your home of the St. Louis Blues. You heard that press conference in its entirety right here on 101 ESPN with the balloon party a little bit ago. Alex, when I hear president of hockey operations, general manager, my mind immediately goes to, well, we've seen this before. It happened with the St. Louis Cardinals like 5 years ago. Michael Gersh was announced as the next general manager. It was going to be a bump in title for John Mozeliak, and really nothing changed. It was just a title change for the two guys that had previously already been running the operations. But it wasn't a change in terms of who was speaking to the media. It wasn't a change in how they went about their day-to-day operations. It was just a title change. This feels different to me. In hearing them explain what this transition is going to look like, it felt more to me like what you see in Toronto, where Shanny oversees everything, but he oversees things in a way that like an advisor to the owner would oversee things. The general manager there operates things on a day-to-day basis. They are the ones that are making the roster decisions. They're putting players through waivers. They're signing guys. But if there's a massive deal like William Nylander getting traded or signed, or this offseason, what they're going to do with Mitch Marner, that is a decision that everybody in the organization comes to the table for, including Shanny. To me, that feels like what we're seeing here in St. Louis, where Shanny's role will be filled eventually 3 years from now by Doug Armstrong, while Alex Steen operates the day-to-day hockey operations department. How did you feel when you heard this announcement earlier today that it would be Alex Steen who was doing that, and how they explained what this process is going to be like as Doug Armstrong transitions out of that day-to-day role?
I thought it was a great move by Doug and by the Blues to bring in Alexander Steen, because I think Steener, covering him for the amount of time that I did on the Blues, you always felt like you were talking to a future executive, because Steen was just always poised. He always had the in-depth answers for you, but he always felt like he had the pulse of the team in the bad times and the good times. He was the one that so many players would talk about, like, oh, yeah, when I was brought up to the league, Steen was the first one that called me. Thomas talked about how Steen would take him out to dinner. Those were the guys that always went back to Steener. So it always felt like he was going to be a future general manager. And I think this is a smart move by the Blues to get somebody who's had his hand in hockey operations since he retired from the league over in Europe. You basically had him help you in the first round of the draft last year when you drafted 2 Swedes.
And I mean, the entire Swedish Hockey League is now playing for the Blues.
And even Elliot Friedman had mentioned about a year ago, I think, like, keep an eye on Alexander Steen. He's going to be a future general manager. So when you've got something like that available to you that's played for you and won a Stanley Cup with you, you get him in-house, and you hope he turns into something great. And here's the factor into it and why I love it so much. He's going to be working under Doug Armstrong, who has had a longevity of success in his career. So it's a smart move by the Blues, and you're seeing a lot of this around the National Hockey League now. You got a president of hockey operations. You've got a general manager. You mentioned the Toronto Maple Leafs with Shanahan and Brad Treliving. The Boston Bruins are another team that does this. Cam Neely is their president of hockey ops. Don Sweeney is their general manager. You've got a Hall of Famer in Cam Neely as their president of hockey ops, and you've got somebody who's played in the NHL, has been around the game a long time, as their general manager. The hierarchy of what the decisions are going to be is going to be very intriguing, but the roles it really seems like the first year is going to be learn under Doug Armstrong. The next year it's going to be, get your feet wet a little bit here, start learning. And then by 2026, it felt, hearing Doug Armstrong talk, that this isn't going to be a, hey, always come to me for an approval kind of thing. It's in 2026, when you're the general manager, Alex Steen, it's your team. You make the decisions. Now, I've got the veto up here as the president of hockey operations if we don't like it, but this is your roster, and it feels like Doug Armstrong's given a lot of grace to the factor of you're taking over this team.
Yeah, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. The YouTube chat is off and running as well. YouTube.com/101ESPN-STL. They affectionately call themselves the Graveyard over there. I want to hear your thoughts on the announcement today that Alex Steen will be the next general manager of the St. Louis Blues, and the idea that Doug Armstrong's still going to be around but not necessarily overseeing the day-to-day operations. Alex, in some ways, that makes me a little nervous. Not because I don't trust Alex Steen, but because I had grown to understand what a Doug Armstrong-led hockey operations department looks like. I have a good idea of the types of players that he's going to be looking for, the way that he's going to handle contracts, the way that he's going to oversee the entire department. I don't know what that's going to look like with Alex Steen. And in some ways, that's super exciting because it's new, it's fresh, it's interesting, right? It's something that we haven't seen in almost 20 years here in St. Louis. Yeah. And also terrifying. Because Doug Armstrong is really freaking good at this, man. And there are times where I get frustrated with some of the individual decisions that he has or will make. I got frustrated with the no-move clause thing. I get frustrated when they decide to move on from Alex Pietrangelo or David Perron, or the way that they decided to remake their defensemen. But Army is always looking for the next thing. Where is hockey going? And he doesn't want to get left behind. And something I really respect about the way that he operates. I think Alex Steen will do the same thing. I think he has a chance to be really, really good at this. We have also seen people that we think have no chance at failing go in and be really bad at things. So, again, I'm not saying that that's going to be the case for Steen, but that is something that has little anxiety for me if I'm a Blues fan today. Is this is going to be new. It's going to be different. And that is both fun, exciting, and also kind of scary on the other side of it.
It is. And, I mean, you can't deny that because it's been the safety blanket of Blues fans knowing that, hey, we've got the longest tenured general manager in hockey, and he's putting this team together, and he's had success. We've had ups and downs. I think there's probably a lot more people that saw today and were thinking, oh, good, Doug Armstrong's gone because of what's happened over the last 4 to 5 years. But in terms of longevity from when he's taken over, he's kept this team very competitive, and that is scary. I go back to a conversation that Doug had with myself and Curbs back at Obie Clark's a couple of years ago, and we were talking just about his career, and we talked about kind of the situation that you're painting right there. You're putting somebody who is brand new in a role, and it's very frightening. And he referenced when he was working under Bob Gainey, who was the general manager, the president of hockey ops in Dallas, and he was just an assistant GM. And Bob Gainey basically told Army, look, you're going to have to figure this out, so at some point you're going to take the reins of this. And Doug said that he had a trade in front of him that he wasn't sure if he should pull off, and it was Joe Nieuwendyk being traded away from the Dallas Stars. And he was like, man, this is a Hall of Famer. I don't know if we should do this, but it was a fan. People did not like it. Traded for Jamie Langenbrunner, and people hated it at the time because it was like you're getting rid of a fan favorite, but that turned into success in Langenbrunner, a long-tenured Dallas Stars. So what I'm getting at with that long story is it seems scary with Alex Steen now making those day-to-day decisions, but this is a dude who is respected in the National Hockey League that has a pulse for locker rooms, and he's going to learn under Doug Armstrong for 2 years before he makes those decisions.
I also like this. It comes from Mike over in the YouTube chat. Again, youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. Here's what I like about it, guys. It's about the communication. We know what they are planning. We understand what the plan is going to be. Another team in town could learn something here. I totally agree. I think that is such a big part of this, is just clear, concise, open communication with your fan base as to what the current plan is. Hey, Doug Armstrong is still in charge. That is the guy for the next 2 seasons. And then the transition begins. And Alex Steen, based on my understanding from listening to them, and I'm sure we'll get a clearer understanding over the coming months, weeks, and years, but Alex Steen at first will probably get the GM title, and it'll be a collaboration between the two. They will make decisions, at least for a little bit, I would guess, together. And over time, there will be more and more decisions that are just, hey, Steen, you got this, dude. Like that first year, it might be a collaboration between the two. Year 2, it's mostly Steen. And by year 3, when he is in the final year of this current contract, it's probably exclusively Steen's decisions to make. I think that's really smart. I think it's a good way to transition away from somebody like Doug Armstrong to somebody that is new in this position. I also know, Alex, something that Doug Armstrong does a lot is surround himself with former players. He's done it with Keith Kachuk. He's done it with Al McInnes. He's done it with Mellenby. Like guys that have been around the sport for their entire lives. Army appreciates, respects, and consumes the things that they have to say. And I don't think it's surprising that one of the guys that had been around for most of his tenure, that when you talk to people that have been around that team longer than I have, certainly, Alex Steen is immediately the guy they point to and say, that guy's going to be a future executive. Yeah. It's not surprising to me at all that that's the one that he chose to be his successor here in St. Louis. He trusts him.
And he's trusted him for a long time. Doug mentioned it in the press conference of, the conversation that he had with Steen after they traded Paul Stastny. And Steen was essentially saying, like, look, unless you start winning, I want out, because he wanted to win. Yep. And Doug was like, just give me a chance. That shows the respect, because remember what happened after. Traded for Braden Shen. You traded away Ryan Reeves and got Oscar Sundquist and a first-round pick, and then you made the one off-season move of O'Reilly, Bozak, and Pat Maroon with David Perron. That's respect. And if Doug's showing respect to a player at that time as a player, he's going to show respect to that individual, and he trusts that individual to put the right touches on a roster that's going to need fixing when they're ready to compete.
I do find it interesting. He's pretty old school.
Steener?
Alex Steen is very old school hockey.
I think that's the perfect person for a Blues roster, though.
I think it can be. I just find it to be really interesting because I remember, man, it was not all sunshine and lollipops around the Blues prior to them winning the Cup in 2019. There were some ups and downs. And that's the case with every team when they go through the trials and tribulations that we saw here in St. Louis for a number of years. But it's going to be really interesting to see what that looks like, just like, I wouldn't say he's a prickly personality, but he's somebody that will call you out if you're not getting your job done, or at least that's the way that he was, from my understanding, when he was a player. We'll see what that looks like in that role as the general manager here in St. Louis. So I'm really interested to see what this looks like. We'll let you hear more of what Doug Armstrong had to say earlier today about this transition as we go along. He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Plenty more on the Blues throughout the day today. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you guys would like to get your thoughts in, you can do so on the mic drop feature as well. You can find that over on the 101 ESPN app. What do you think of the transition from Doug Armstrong to the next general manager of the St. Louis Blues, Alex Steen? Get into so much more throughout the day today. Questions and answers at 11:45. But coming up next, the lineup is out. T-Bone tells us. We'll get into the lineup game next year on 101 ESPN.
Series win, boys. I already know the lineup. It's going to be all the regulars.
Yeah. I don't know what that means at this point.
That's kind of why I said it.
The problem is like, okay, yeah, the regulars.
Kind of why I said it.
Who are the regulars?
Obviously, Pedro Pajes is. Brandon Crawford is a regular.
All right, so we don't have to worry, Alex, about 2 days off. They do not have an off day tomorrow because sometimes you have to think about, okay, they're getting the 48 hours. That means Mason Wynn is getting the day off. I mean, so
what kind of backwards thinking is that? Like, well, you day off tomorrow, so I'm going to give you the extra day off when we need to win the series. But we're playing tomorrow. We got a stretch of like 12 games, so I need you in there.
Hey, Alex.
Yeah.
I think Mason Wynn's going to be off today.
No, I don't.
You don't?
You cannot lose a series to the Pirates.
Dude,
you cannot lose a series to the Pirates.
I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. I don't know if I've announced this on the show yet. I'm officially team Cardinals know what they're doing with Mason Wynn's back.
Oh, I thought you were officially off the train.
No, when I see him grimacing like 3 times a week because his back is hurting, all right, you win.
Take better swings, man.
I'm willing to have Brandon Crawford in the lineup once a week to be able to keep that guy out there a little bit longer.
Hockey players
play through broken ribs.
Ryan O'Reilly had a punctured lung and he won a Stanley Cup.
Checks notes. Mason Wynn is a baseball player, so
be a man.
I'll go ahead and allow him
I
to
don't
take a couple
agree
of
with
days
you,
off.
though. You have to win the series against the Pirates. Mason Wynn's in the lineup.
All right, so Mitch Keller is on the mound today. He is very, very good. He is a right-handed pitcher. Alex, if you look at his splits so far this year, there basically are none. Lefties, righties, they're roughly the same against him, so keep that in mind as we go through this lineup. Let's start out with the leadoff position. Alex, you think it's Mason Wynn?
I do.
I'm watching the Futures game, and this thing's all over
Come on,
Instagram.
Ollie. Show me
this
right.
guy threw a ball 100 across the time. That's awesome, but like, how many throwing errors does he have?
Shut up.
Mason Wynn batting leadoff in the lineup today, I would imagine, at the shortstop position. Let's go with Alec Burleson batting second. Alex.
Regulars.
Regulars.
Ollie's in it to win it.
Manly.
Let's keep this train moving, Goldie.
All right, number 3, Goldie.
I love gold.
So
It's a right-handed pitcher. It's got to be
Arenado's in the 5. Gorman.
Stormin Gorman. He's taking the league by storm.
Nolan Arenado.
Nolan is
Oh my
a
God.
security guard at
This
the
feels good.
lumber yard.
Is this what the fast lane feels?
Ivan Herrera.
Ivan.
He didn't start yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Ivan Herrera.
Wait, yeah,
What
he did.
the H is wrong with you guys?
But he didn't start 2 nights ago.
Miles Michaelis
So why
start.
are we giving him the night off?
Brendan Donovan, please.
All right. Way to go, Donnie. Herrera's in the lineup, though, right?
Yeah, Herrera next.
Okay, Herrera. Okay, cool.
That's my bad.
No, no, no.
Pedro Pajes.
Dylan Carlson.
Dylan Carlson.
Sorry, guys.
Pedro Pajes.
Oh, Matt Carpenter. Was that for Matt Carpenter?
For both.
Okay.
Oh, just so you know.
So it's not Ciani.
For me?
Oh, for me.
Maybe? That's the one guy we haven't talked about yet.
Need an outfielder, right?
Yeah, but we said Carlson.
For me.
I'll be back.
That's a good drop. Is this Ivan Herrera? If Herrera's not
we've got
batting...
Pajes and Ciani, I would assume.
Yeah, because if Herrera's not batting yet, he's not playing. So
Let's
Pajes.
go Pajes. And then Michael Ciani.
Michael Sinise. Gary Sinise.
Michael.
All right, and that is your Cardinals
Michael,
lineup
Michael,
today.
Michael.
It is
Not Michael
Wynn,
Phelps.
Burley,
Michael
Goldie,
Cera.
Gorman, Arenado, Donnie, Fermin, Pajes, and Ciani. And with that in the back of our mind, Alex, we now have the opportunity to be joined by Doug Armstrong, it looks like. He's calling in to be able to talk to us about the succession plan that the Blues announced just a little bit ago. If you missed it, if you missed the announcement from the St. Louis Blues, Tom Stillman announced just a little while ago on the balloon, while the balloon party was on, Alexander Steen signed a new 5-year contract with the St. Louis Blues. In the first couple of years, he will be in an advisory role. During those years, it will still be Doug Armstrong that is in charge, and then after that, there will be a transition that takes place. In year 3 of Alex Steen's contract, he will take over as the general manager, and that will be the case with Army in charge as the president of hockey operations for years 3, 4, and 5 of their contracts. Doug Armstrong, Blues president of hockey operations and current general manager, joins us now on the 101 ESPN hotline. Army, we appreciate the time. What was today like for you announcing what this transition is going to be like for the Blues over the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's an exciting day for the franchise. I think knowing that we have a plan for next year, and we have a plan for the next 5 years. I think it's important for our players, for our hockey operations staff, and hopefully for our fans. And getting someone like Alexander Steen back in the fold with a major job responsibility moving forward, I think it's really important and a great hire for the Blues.
Doug, what was the thought process for you, or how long did it take you to come to this conclusion in the offseason of looking to bring in Alexander Steen?
I would say it started around Christmas. I thought, when I signed my extension with the Blues 4 years ago, I knew at least in my vision, we were going to have to make some very hard decisions. We had expiring veteran players that helped us win a championship and been very competitive. We had younger players that were getting into that time of needing those long-term extensions, and I felt I owed it to the franchise, myself, and to the future to guide us through that. And now coming out of that, I have 2 years left as a manager, and I really believe that the table is going to be set. We're going to have acquired draft picks. We're going to have prospects. We're going to have cap space coming available. That having someone with the vision of Alexander Steen, the work ethic, and also the age of him to see that through for a number of years was very important. And I was excited that when I brought it to Mr. Stillman and his partners, they were on board with that.
Now, Doug, I am curious, and I just want to clarify this a little bit, because we see over with the Cardinals what their structure looks like. They have a president of baseball operations in John Mozeliak, and then they have a general manager in Michael Gersh. And it seems like, and that was announced about 5 years ago, not much changed in terms of the roles for those two individuals after the change in title. It was just, okay, we're going to bump these guys up in terms of the title that they have. When you look at what the structure will be in place between yourself and Alex Steen 3 years from now, what does that look like in your mind in terms of what the roles are for each individual?
Yeah, I would say my vision is to what it is. I look at George McPhee in Vegas with Kelly McCrimmon. I look at Jimmy Rutherford with Patrick Alvin in Vancouver. My vision is Alex is going to make the hockey decisions that affect the team on a day-to-day basis, trades, signings. What I want to do as president of hockey operations is share my experience. Work with him, making sure that we're doing the right thing for the franchise. And I think that ultimately someone's going to have to make a decision. It will be up to Alex to make those decisions. But over my years of working with different people, that you usually are on the same page when you get down to that if you vet it correctly. But it's not going to be. This isn't I'm not sure how baseball works. I don't want to get into baseball, but in hockey, he's going to be the manager. He's going to be doing the press conference. He's going to be making those decisions. And my job is I'm going to support the scouting staff. I'm going to support Alex. I'm going to support the ownership group. But I do see this as a weighted system where if I do my job well and Alexander does his job well, I'll be less and less relevant as he gets more and more experience.
Doug, you can be honest with us. You're looking forward to not doing those press conferences anymore with all of us, correct?
Actually, you guys are pretty good. I enjoy doing that.
Doug, one thing I brought up in our opening segment, because I was thinking when you were talking about, the role of Alexander Steen, was you did Obie Clarks with myself and Chris Kerber a couple of years ago when you were talking about how you kind of got integrated into your role with the Dallas Stars with Bob Gainey. And you mentioned how Bob just kind of threw you into the fire towards the year where you became the general manager. Is that something that down the road with Steen, or you're going to feel like you can put him in that position too?
Yeah, Bob didn't stick around after he left. It's a little bit different, but I call it like, at some point you have to close the door. You have to be the only one in the room. You have to make a decision. And that's going to be his job in starting in like it was my job when we went to the draft, when we took Tarasenko and Schwartz. Larry had set everything up, and then you decide, do you want to trade that pick for pick 16 and take Tarasenko or not? And ultimately someone makes those decisions. But I'm going to be much more hands-on, partly because, as of today, he's got zero experience.
Right.
When I took over for Bob, I had 12 years experience in management. So I'm going to be lending a guiding hand. I'm going to let him know, things that I'm observing, how to deal with his staff. But, I'm not going to throw him into the deep end maybe like I was, but I also have to say I was more prepared for that than he will be in 2 years.
Doug Armstrong joining us here on 101 ESPN. Doug, when you look at what the decisions are going to be this offseason, for example, and you think about Alex Steen's involvement in some of those decisions that will very likely affect the team 2, 3, 4 years down the road when he is in position to be general manager, how much involvement or sway do you expect him to have this offseason in some of those choices?
Yeah, would be equal to that of Tim Taylor and Al McGinnis and Peter Chiarelli and Scott Mellanby and Ryan Miller. My hands are still on the wheel, and I'm going to make those decisions for the organization. But quite honestly, over the last 6 months, I've included him on all of our calls, all our pro calls, all our amateur calls, because I wanted him to start to gain the knowledge. And part of gaining the knowledge is to see if he wanted to do this job. It's not for everybody, and the more that I fed him, the more that he wanted to eat, and that was that hooked me that he's the right guy for the job. But I'm going to weigh his opinion like I weigh everybody else's. But ultimately, it'll be my hands on the wheel. But he'll have a say like everybody else, and his knowledge of certain things is greater than his knowledge of other things. And the things he's very knowledgeable in, I'm going to tap into very deeply.
To me, Doug, what makes Steiner so special, at least seeing him in the locker room and covering him on a day-to-day basis, was just his ability to be able to touch in whatever type of clique was in a team. It was, whether it was a group of younger players or a group of veteran players when he was a little bit in that middle range, he always seemed to, everyone kind of gravitated towards Alexander Steen. How important is that from a general manager's perspective?
Well, to me, it's very important, and those are it's walking through the marketing department, like when you're a manager. Like as a player, I always I take it to its simplest form. Like he could go to Paul Mono's in Napoli with a couple, or he could go to O.B. Clark's and have a few beers with the rest of the guys. Like he can gravitate through all of those different groups. As a manager, I think what you want to be able to do is gravitate through the coach's office to the trainer's office, then to the public relations office, then to the finance office, then to the and make everyone feel like they're part of a team. And I think that's one of his greatest strengths, is his ability to make everybody feel good about their role. And it was that as a player. He made the trainers, equipment, medical staff. He made everyone feel like they were very important, because ultimately, if you want to win, everybody is important, and he does a great job of doing that. And now it's expanding his horizons into finance and into marketing, public relations, sponsorship. There's a lot of things that you want to lend support to as a manager that we're going to integrate him into starting immediately. You
have discussions, Doug, with general managers across the National Hockey League. How have you seen that development of former players turning into front office executives kind of mold? Because if you look around the National Hockey League, there's about half of the general managers right now that had a long playing career in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, and I think all of this goes over cycles. Obviously, when I first started, almost all the managers were former players to some level, and then a lot of the agents became managers, and then player personnel. And now I just look at the great success Chris Drury, Gianni Barrera is having. There's a wealth of knowledge from those players, and we're not doing this because it's a trend. We're doing this because I think Alexander Steen is the perfect guy to be the manager here for a long, long time, and to bring championship caliber hockey here, and hopefully, when he retires, he's the winningest GM in Blues history.
We just got a couple more minutes here with Doug Armstrong, Blues president of hockey operations, joining us on the day that the St. Louis Blues announced that Alex Steen will be the next GM for the St. Louis Blues. Army, can you pinpoint a time or a moment, or maybe just your experience with Alex Steen, in which you realized this is a guy that could do this kind of a job at some point in his career, whether it was while he was still playing or in the last couple of years?
No, it was while he was playing, and it's those relationships that you build over time, and you're in Buffalo in the lobby, and you start talking about, like, some people you talk about how your kid's doing, and some people talk about what's going on in the hockey world. Steiner was always we got into hockey pretty quickly. He was someone that over your time, you gravitate towards certain people. And like I had Steve Ott that I used as a barometer for right and wrong, what was going on with their team. I had Brendan Morrow in the past, David Backus and Alexander Steen. Like there's certain people that you go to when you want straight answers that are willing to give you straight answers too, that they're, I always try and tell the players, like, I'm unoffendable as long as it's for the betterment of the team. Like if, and I say, I hope you're unoffendable if what I tell you is for the best of the team too. And Alexander Steen was always one of those guys that always thought about what was best for the team. And I noticed that, probably halfway through, his playing career here, when you come in and you find your way, and then you start to realize that the only thing that really matters is winning. And he had that thirst to win, and I had that thirst to win, and that's where we started to really talk more about what we needed to do. And he was that sounding board in the room that I really respected.
Doug, final one for me, and just kind of a general hockey question, because I know you and Steen are both mentioned in the press conference today that, the focus right now is the start of training camp to get this team going in the right direction and to get back into the winning side this upcoming year. When you watch these Stanley Cup playoffs and Stanley Cup final right now, have you taken anything away from the teams and as they've kind of gone on to the next rounds and kind of how you can implement that into your roster?
Yeah, you look at how they're constructed. Like, are they one-year wonders? Have they been there for a while? Both have built a strong foundation of a team. Florida, made the finals a year ago. They won the President's Trophy the year before that. A little bit like St. Louis was for a decade, and Edmonton's like that. Like you want to build something that's sustainable, and I think that's the blueprint that I want to use to stay the course. Is that one-hit wonders. They're nice. It's great when you are the one-hit wonder while you're going through it. But I want sustainability, and I think that's what we're trying to build towards. And keeping competitive today, pushing today's players, but not at the expense of not having a future. And I think those franchises have done that very well.
Doug Armstrong is the St. Louis Blues president of hockey operations, and for at least the next two seasons, the general manager. It was announced earlier today that after that, it will be Alex Steen taking over in that capacity, and we appreciate Doug Armstrong joining us on the day of that announcement here on 101 ESPN. Army, all the best to you and your family as we go through this offseason. We wish you nothing but the best, and we'll talk with you again soon.
Enjoy
Thanks for giving
Vegas.
us the time today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Vegas. It's going to be nice and cool there.
Yeah, I'm sure. I hear it's great this time of the year.
The good news is, Doug, you never have to walk outside in Vegas.
Exactly. You guys take care. I always appreciate being on with you.
See you,
Absolutely.
Doug.
That's Doug Armstrong, Blues president of hockey operations, and for the next 2 years, general manager. Alex, your biggest takeaway from that?
I think it's kind of what we said in the open with this. Doug never looks at the here and now. It's always 5, 6, 7 years from now. And if he was starting to think about this at Christmas time, like he told us of, bringing in Steener, and look, like, I think he knew Steen was going to be a front office person. It's just a matter of putting your pride aside and sitting there and saying, like, if I bring somebody in, what's that going to look like for me down the road?
Dude, that had to be so hard.
Especially for Doug. Like, he even said it in the opener, like, I can do this for 10 more years. But Doug did not want to go elsewhere, which I think is very important for Blues fans to understand. He didn't want to go somewhere else and start over, but he also realized that whatever was taking place might get stale, and rather Doug just step aside or get fired or anything like that. He said, let's bring somebody in that I can work with, that I trust, that I believe is going to be very good at this job. I thought that statement was very important because literally half of the league right now is general managers or former players.
Doug Armstrong is not even 60 years old, guys. He's 59 years old. When he says, I could do this another 10 years, he's not kidding. He literally could. He's more than capable of doing that.
He's been doing it since he's 19.
Think about how hard it has to be to set aside your pride and your, ego, that I can continue doing this. I could build another championship contender, and I can still be the guy in St. Louis as the guy that is operating the hockey operation side of things. And instead, he said, the best thing for this franchise is for me to find the next guy.
Yeah.
He said earlier today, and I loved it, it was, hey, I've been doing this for like 17 years here in St. Louis. There's been a generation of fans that the only voice they've heard in this capacity is me. There's been a generation of players that the only guy that they know when they're doing any of the negotiations or anything, it's me. And it's time, there's a time when it is it's necessary for a fresh voice in this position. And he said, I think we're getting close to that time. Dude, I don't think I have that in me. I don't.
No.
Like, I hope I never lose this position. I hope I die on these airwaves because it's the only thing I've ever known. It's the only thing I've ever wanted to do. And I will hold the position as long as they will possibly have me
Great
doing
job,
it.
man. Great job, man. Me too, by the way. I second what
That's
PK
it.
said.
Like, it's all I want. And for Army, this is all he's ever wanted. And he said, I think it's best for the organization, not necessarily best for me, but for the organization, for us to have somebody else in place, and Alex Steen is that guy, and he's ready for this, and it is time for us to go through this transition. I cannot tell you how much I respect that decision to go about it this way.
So,
It's smart, it's well thought out, and it is something that I personally do not have in me. I am too egotistical, and I am too self-centered to do something that he just did.
So to put this into perspective for people, because I've seen pushback on him bringing somebody who's inexperienced and letting him take the reins of a team 2 years from now when they're ready to compete. The LA Kings, they brought in Rob Blake in 2014 as the assistant general manager to a team that they felt was ready to win. And they went on to win the cup that year. Rob Blake was an assistant GM. So it's a different situation because, of course, this team's not willing to win a cup anytime soon. But he had zero experience. He retired in 2014 and then joined the team right after retirement. No experience as an assistant GM, which is essentially what Steen is right now. And then in 2017, he took over as the general manager of that team. Now, they've had their downs, but the Blues have referenced them as the retool period. So it doesn't mean when a guy comes in with no experience that he's going to be awful. It's your training for a couple of years, but then when you get the reins, your hockey experience takes over. The other 2 years is what Doug mentioned. You got to learn the financial side of it. You got to learn the PR side of it. You got to learn everything that the players really didn't have to deal with. But
in meetings, like how do I operate a meeting? Who do I need to meet with? Who do I have arrange this? Who do I have call this general manager?
You have to be on top of all of your drafting scouts to find out, hey, are you checking in on these guys? What's all of this? Like, that's all
Certain guys are call people. Certain guys are FaceTime people. Certain guys in the organization and elsewhere, general managers are texters. Like some guys you get in touch with via email. Like, just all of these little things that are just nuances of the job.
That's what
Army has all of that in the back of his head. Like that.
And that's what Steen is training for.
Exactly.
Steen knows what it takes to have a successful team in a playoff. He was a part of one in St. Louis for multiple years. The question is just, how do I do that with the stuff that goes on behind the scenes? And you've got the best in the National Hockey League at working with you on that.
So that is the news of the day. The St. Louis Blues have announced that Alex Steen will be the next general manager of the team. That will take place 3 years from now. Over the next couple of years, he's going to be working in an advisory role with Doug Armstrong. And by the way, sincerely appreciate Doug Armstrong for giving us that time. It was late notice, but we appreciate him hopping on with us today. Shout out to the Blues for making that possible. If you missed any of our conversation with him, check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Center.
Coming up next, if you guys have any questions about this or the Cardinals, we'll get into that next on Questions and Answers here on BK and Ferrario.
Terry Hendricks here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals yesterday beat the Pittsburgh Pirates 4-2. They'll be back in action here in just a little over an hour when they wrap up their three-game set with Pittsburgh. 1:15 will be the start. Mitch Keller gets a start for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Lance Lynn will be on the mound for the St. Louis Cardinals. And the big news today is the St. Louis Blues announced that Doug Armstrong has signed a contract extension to remain as the president of hockey operations through the 2028-2029 season. And Alexander Steen will take over as the general manager in 2026. The Sports Update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Three one 9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Alex, this one comes from the text line. Do you think that Bannister getting signed to a 2-year extension has anything to do with management also changing after 2 years? Could be the whole organization is currently in development mode.
Yeah, but I don't think it's I don't think that's in a bad sense. I think that's in a good sense. They view that at the end of that 2-year run, they expect this team to be ready to compete. At least that's what they've told us with this plan in place. So your head coach is up for discussion. Your new general manager takes over, and basically the core of your team is all in a position to upgrade with a lot more money coming in. I think the team has built this, which once again showcases what Doug Armstrong always does, is plan far enough ahead. It puts the team in a position to make a lot of decisions to either we didn't make the strides we were supposed to, and so now we're still in development, or we're ready to compete, so now we can be aggressive.
I think most coaching, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, Alex, I think most coaching contracts in the NHL, especially for guys that don't have a lot of experience, 2 to 3 years, generally speaking.
Yeah, I would say 2 years is the norm.
So I
it's
think
a bridge contract.
I think that's why you saw it in that range. I do think it's interesting, though, that there will be potentially an opening as the head coach when Alex Steen takes over as the general manager. So it will be his determination at that point. I think it's smart. Do you want to bring Bannister back? Do you want to look elsewhere? And it's up to Alex Steen. Your choice, dude.
Your team.
You are now in charge. You're the guy that's making those kinds of calls. So I don't think it's necessarily because of the Alex Steen decision, although they clearly knew this was coming. I do think it is interesting, though, to note that the timeline matches up. All right, this one comes from the 314. Do you guys see Flores taking over as the Cardinals general manager after John Mozeliak is finished? I do not, especially after hearing the comment from John Mozeliak recently.
Yeah, well, he's not going to be the one making that hire, is he?
I don't know if you saw the quote, Alex, but it was kind of a footnote in one of his answers during the blogger Q&A that he did over the weekend, where they asked about the drafts recently. And he said, Randy has done a good job for us, especially that 2020 draft where it's going to go down as an all-timer. You look at the guys that they were able to draft there. It's an amazing draft. 5 rounds, and they hit seemingly on every single one of them. He said, but since then, we haven't gotten enough out of our drafts, and this is a really big year for Randy. He's got to get it right. It's like, whoa. Okay. That is the kind of accountability you don't hear a whole lot from the St. Louis Cardinals, and I found that to be really interesting. So if I had to put a bet today on who the next Pobo will be for the Cardinals, I think it will be Heimblum. That would be my current bet for the Cardinals. I'm not telling you should like that.
They asked general manager, though, right?
I mean, same idea.
But what I mean is, I don't think Flores would get. I think Heim's going to be bringing in his people.
Yeah, sure. Either way, my answer to the question is no, I do not see that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think he would, because I think this is a big draft for him, and I kind of agree with Alex. When Heimblum takes over, he'll probably keep some of the people that are around here now. Like, he may keep like a Michael Gersh. Maybe he does keep a Randy Flores. But I think for the most part, he's going to want to bring in his own personnel. So I would say he's probably not the GM moving forward.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys have been in 9 Cardinals games so far this year. They have lost all 9 of them. Is it time for me to stop going to games because I am in pain?
Save your money. You are essentially BK. Just got to stay home, man.
They don't always lose the games that I go to. They're just always weird.
Yeah, and that person was probably on time and saw first.
Yeah, totally wasn't out of.
I'm always on time when I'm covering the game. It's just when I'm going as a fan.
It's the big moments. Yeah, just
Albert
stay
Pujols'
home.
first home run back here in St. Louis. That was a big one. It was frustrating.
Look, man, Grant Francis suffers from the same jinx because when he filled in for me, I think it was 3 times this year on pre and post, they lost every one of those games. And at the third one, Curbs was like, "You're not doing this anymore." Grant was like, "You gotta be kidding me."
All right, final question here from the 314. Guys, do you think that Alex Steen becoming a general manager in 2 years has any weight on the players coming or going this offseason? I find it interesting to see how much influence he has in their decisions. That is something that I want to discuss with Alex next. It's going to be interesting, Alex, in my opinion, to see how much sway he has on the current roster. We asked Doug Armstrong about this a little bit earlier today. We'll give you our thoughts on it next year on 101 ESPN.
my hands are still on the wheel, and I'm going to make those decisions for the organization. But quite honestly, over the last 6 months, I've included him on all of our calls, all our pro calls, all our amateur calls, because I wanted him to start to gain the knowledge. And part of gaining the knowledge is to see if he wanted to do this job. I'm going to weigh his opinion like I weigh everybody else's, but ultimately, it'll be my hands on the wheel, but he'll have a say like everybody else. And his knowledge of certain things is greater than his knowledge of other things. And the things he's very knowledgeable in, I'm going to tap into very deeply.
That was Doug Armstrong, Blues president of hockey operations and current general manager, joining us a little bit earlier today discussing, Alex, what Alex Steen's role will be this offseason. 2 years from now, Alex Steen will be the general manager, but I do find it really interesting now that he has been named a special advisor to Doug Armstrong, and it is known internally and externally that Steen will be the next guy that's making the calls on who stays, who goes, what the roster looks like, etc. Man, what's that going to mean for this offseason? Army played it very, very close to the vest with that answer to us. Basically say, hey, listen, I'm still the guy that's in charge here. Of course, that makes all the sense in the world. I do wonder, though, and I have to imagine there will be some conversations about, hey, what do you envision for the roster when you're in charge? And one of those conversations I would have to assume, Alex, will be about Pavel Buchnevich's future. Hey, do you want this guy to be a part of the core when you take over? Because he has one more year left. And then after that, he's a UFA. And if we decide to extend him now, that's going to be a big part of your core, Alex Steen, whenever you take over. He's got to be involved in that conversation. And he knows enough about Booch. He's been around this team long enough to have a pretty good understanding of whether or not that's a guy he wants to build around. Another conversation that I would assume will be had with Alex Steen. Hey, what do you want a defensive core to look like? An Alex Steen-led team. What is the vision for what your defensemen look like? How do they play? What is your schematics look like? That will influence what this offseason looks like in terms of who they continue building around. Or if they consider a buyout. This is not something they've done at any point under Doug Armstrong. Well, now I know who the general manager is going to be in 3 years when that buyout would affect the team. Right now, you get the cap savings if you were to buy a player out. 3, 4, 5 years down the road, that is when you get hit with money that you otherwise would not be paying. So do they consider that for a guy like Torrey Krug, for example? That is something that I'm going to be fascinated with, Alex. Now that we know what the plan is, what the succession plan is that's in place, what is that going to mean for this offseason and some of the decisions that the Blues decide to make?
I'll give you another one that you didn't mention. Kyrie's no trade clause that kicks in before the start of next season. And he's under contract, but no trade kicks in. And your team, when you take over Alexander Steen, is going to have that no trade clause. As it stands now, Steen is going to have 3 forwards under contract, 3 defensemen under contract, and 1 goaltender under contract in 2026, 2027. And so, you have the basis for your roster.
And by the way, only one of those players that you just mentioned, other than Thomas, Kyrou, Shin, are signed beyond that year.
Yeah.
It's Thomas, Kyrou, Shin, and Parayko.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only guys that he has signed in his second year as general manager of the St. Louis Blues right now.
And all of them have no trade clauses with the exception of Falk and Krugs. Those are modified by the time Steen takes over. So the reason I'm doing that is because your core is in place if you're Steen. You've got Thomas, you've got Shen, you've got Parayko, you've got Kyrou. But I think those are decisions you have to make. And the Buchnevich one I find probably the most fascinating because that's not just a player you're throwing into the problem, blanking right now. That's not just a player you're throwing into what you have in front of you. That's a player that's going to make $8 million, that'll probably have a no trade clause, that's 31 years old, that's locked up for 6 to 8 years. That's a core piece of your roster. And look, Doug is going to be the driver with all of this, but before you make that decision, and I think the one quote that he had in his sentence was really telling to me. He said there are certain things that Alexander Steen is great at and then certain things that he's got to figure out. The thing that Steen is great at, and the reason that I feel like he's going to be a great general manager, is he knows the pulse of the room and he knows how players perform and what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. And the conversation is going to be, is he a part of the solution or is he a part of the problem by the time you take over as general manager? I think that, to me, along with Jordan Kyrou, are going to be the 2 biggest things that are discussed this offseason.
So you know what I find to be really interesting about Steen is, one of the many pieces of this. We talk a lot about, hey, he was a part of that 2019 roster. He knows what it looks like to have a winning roster, right? Part of that winning roster was Vladimir Tarasenko.
Yeah.
Who was a point of frustration for many Blues players and fans for large stretches of his career here in St. Louis. And also, they don't win the Cup without him.
Yep.
They don't. They don't win that Stanley Cup if they don't get the best version of Vladimir Tarasenko that year. And so I would be curious, and we'll never get this honest answer, but they will internally. How does that influence how a guy like Alex Steen views somebody like a Jordan Kyrou? Because you know what the talent is there. You need players like Jordan Kyrou to win a Stanley Cup. But the question is, can you get the best out of him? Can you get him to do for your team what Vladdy did in 2019, where he was all in? He was all in on that team and being playing a team style game. If the answer to that question is yes, you can get that out of Kyrou, and they believe that, well, then you got to build around him. You have to have him as a part of the core because you need somebody that has the capability of scoring 35-plus goals in any individual season. And I don't think they have anybody else in the roster currently that has that capability. But if the answer is no, then you got to make the decision to move him out of here. And I find it fascinating that he saw it up close and in person, and he was a part of the group that they had some hard conversations at times with Vladdy. He was one of those guys that had those talks with him. How's that going to influence some of what they decide moving forward? Because it's not just going to be a bunch of yes men on the team. You can't build a team that way. You can't. Not in the NHL, not in Major League Baseball, not in the NFL. You got to have some dudes that are frustrating to play with, but damn it, they are good players. And Jordan Kyrou could be one of those guys for Steen, where he takes him aside and says, we got to get the best out of you. I've seen what this looks like. I know what it can be, but we got to get you there. And then it just becomes a buy-in question.
I do think it's important to have the linear message from your general manager down through your leadership core, because if you think about it, your leadership, Parayko, Shen, Thomas, all three of those guys were a part of Steen's, on the team with Steen when they won the Stanley Cup, and really for a few years prior to that. So they saw it. And to the point of your Vladimir Tarasenko thing, Steen just didn't, he not only saw what it took to win with Tarasenko, he saw how long it took to get there. Sure. Because they went through two different captains working with Tarasenko and not making him to be this all-out problem, but it always seems to gravitate towards, well, Tarasenko's not the guy we need him to be, and we need him to buy in. Backus even told us this. So Steen saw what it took to get the best out of Tarasenko, and what it took was surrounding him with a roster that was able to cover up for the deficiencies on the ice. The question is, can you do that with a Jordan Kyrou when the cap goes up, but when you have multiple guys that are making that type of money? And that's why I find the Buchnevich thing so interesting tied into Kyrou, because if you're paying that one $8 million, can that cover up the deficiencies of Kyrou when you're ready to compete? And are you able to build a roster with three guys making that $8 million? You also
saw David Perron in the early portion of his career, and then saw David Perron at the back end of his career, and the differences in the two different guys and how they were able to help the Blues at those respective points in his career.
And the other one the other one I didn't get to comment on was the defense, because you're absolutely right. When this team won, Steen saw what it took, and it was big, heavy defensemen. And I do think that's going to be part of the decision-making moving forward with Steen, is looking at this defensive core and figuring out, what do we have to do to replicate that? It's what Binner said yesterday. Like, you want to replicate what you did when you won the Cup. You know you can't do it exactly, but you're going to have somebody who has a voice in the conversations with Doug Armstrong in the now that can start making those trends the right way.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone on BK. If you missed it earlier, there was an announcement from the St. Louis Blues this morning that Alexander Steen will be the next general manager of the St. Louis Blues. There will be a transition over the next 2 seasons. Doug Armstrong will retain his current responsibilities as president of hockey operations and general manager over those 2 years, with Steen serving in an advisory role. And then 3 years from now, Steen will take over as GM, and this is not like what the Cardinals have done. This is not the same thing as Gersh taking over as GM. Alexander Steen will be the one that is operating the team on a day-to-day basis. He will be the one that is answering the questions from the media. He will be the one that is held accountable for a lot of this stuff. He's the guy. He's the guy that's going to be making decisions 3 years from now. And at that point, Army is a figurehead. He is somebody that they can go to for big-time decisions that affect the long-term future of the team. But otherwise, it's going to be on Steen. So I find that to be really interesting. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll get into some NFL quick hitters today. But coming up next, Alex, the Cardinals have been the second-best team in the National League over the last month. So why doesn't it feel that way? We'll talk about it here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, so the Cardinals have the second best record in the National League over the course of the last month, Alex. In that span, this is going back to May 12th. The Cardinals are 17-10. That's the sixth best winning percentage in all of Major League Baseball. And in that time, they're second in the National League in batting average. They're third in OPS plus. They're top 5 in basically every statistical offensive category. They're also third in the National League over the last month in starting pitching ERA and 7th in reliever ERA. Now, the relievers mostly are all kind of in that same bunch. They're somewhere between 3.5 and 3.7. So the difference between being like third and 7th in middle of the pack is almost nothing. It's like a run here or there. But I wanted to discuss this because it doesn't feel like the Cardinals have been the second best team in the National League over the last month. It feels like most of our listening audience right now is, if not more frustrated today than they were a month ago, the same amount of frustrated today with the team as they were a month ago.
I'm with you guys.
And I'm trying to understand this, not because I disagree with it. I feel the same way many of you in the listening audience do right now. But I'm basically trying to have an open discussion here as to why we feel that way, Alex. Like, why do we feel the way we do about the Cardinals when they have been pretty damn good now for a full month of the season? What do you think is happening there? Why is there a disconnect?
I mean, I have to imagine that because they've lost the faith. Like, it's hard for me even after a month to view it and say, yeah, they're great again. Because the games that they're winning don't feel like they're great. Like the month of May, I can't deny they're hitting the ball hard, which is what we were complaining about. Their pitching has sustained, and their bullpen has been great. And in that month of May, we're talking about beating one of the best teams in Major League Baseball over the Baltimore Orioles, the Boston Red Sox. You took down the Chicago Cubs. But it's like I go piece by piece with it. Like I look at the month in a whole, sure. But that Angels series, I know they won it, but they didn't really. Like, it felt like they just got shellacked and they got lucky. They got beat by the Brewers. We're talking about the month of May, they've been great. We're talking about 2.5 weeks of them being great. And that's
a month, though.
Well, I get it, it's the month, but the numbers are inflated because of how great they were in the Angels, Red Sox, Orioles, and Cubs series.
I mean, those are
I get it,
series.
But that was 2.5 weeks. And you said, why aren't we buying into it? Because it was 2.5 weeks. And I know what the first month of the season looked like, and frankly, I've seen what a couple of games looked like in the month of June.
But isn't that how contenders are made? Like, when you look at the end of the year and you see, hey, a team makes the playoffs with 86 wins. Not what we're seeing right now where a team feels like it's going to get in with 80. But, you know, like last year, Diamondbacks won 86, right? Isn't that what it was? 84, 86, something like that.
Like 84.
I mean, all you got to do is basically play 500 baseball for the entirety of the season and then get hot for a 2-week stretch. And boom, playoff contender. Like that's all it is. That's all that's required is 500 all year long and a 2-week stretch where you're really good. And if you do that, you're a contender in today's version of Major League Baseball. So like, I think what you're saying there is totally fair, Alex, is that's why it doesn't feel, oh my gosh, the Cardinals are back, baby. Like this looks but this is what it looks like.
I think it's important.
That's how it feels.
I think it's important when that 2-week stretch takes place, though. I don't think I could get excited about because they had a 2-week stretch in May to say, like, this is what it looks like. Because when their month of August, and look, this has remained to be seen, but this is why I have lack of faith. When their month of August looks a lot like their month of March or April, I can't go back and say, but man, they were great for those 2-week stretch in May.
For me, it's just as simple as this. When I think of a team and when they're playing well, what am I always talking about? It's not what the team is doing as a whole. Like, let's take the New York Yankees, for example. Now, they're a little different because, A, they're in a bigger market, sure, and B, they are one of the best teams, if not the best team in the American League. When you talk about the New York Yankees, what are people talking about? Their stars. They're talking about, man, look at what Aaron Judge is doing. Wow, look at what Juan Soto's doing. Is this the best duo we've ever seen right and left in Major League Baseball history? When you talk about the Cardinals' success, you're not talking about their stars. You're not talking about Paul Goldschmidt going through this unbelievable tear. He's been good. Like, I don't want to take anything away from Goldie because it is unfair that we tie him in with Arenado. But you look at Nolan Arenado in that stretch. Arenado's been, like, okay. He hasn't been great. He's made defensive blunders. He hasn't been a superstar offensively. And then when you look at the pitching staff as a whole, they've got one star on the pitching staff, and until last night had really struggled in his last 5 starts in Sonny Gray. So for me, it is not so much of, like, anything in words of like, oh, well, don't all teams need to go through 2-week stretches? Yeah, they do. But when they do it, like the Diamondbacks from last year, who are we talking about when they got hot? It was Corbin freaking Carroll. This is one of the best young players ever. Ketel Marte is a good player.
Maybe we're seeing that, though. Maybe. And what I mean by that is, in this stretch of games, Nolan Gorman is 5th in the National League in OPS plus, tied with Fernando Tatis Jr. The guys in front of him are jerks and Profar, like, what the hell? Who? Starling Marte, what? And Bryce Harper. He's been really freaking good over the course of the last month. Mason Wynn, 145 OPS plus since May 12th. He's batting .325 with a .500 slugging percentage in that span. Alec Burleson batting .300 with a .500 slugging percentage. Paul Goldschmidt batting .270 with a .460 slugging percentage, which is top 30 in the National League in terms of OPS plus. Brendan Donovan very quietly has found his form again over the last month, batting .310 with an on-base percentage above .380. So, like, I think really this comes down to when you see Nolan Arenado and what he has been doing and the lack of success with him, I think it does so much to influence how we feel about the overall health of the team, because it's supposed to be tied into whether or not that dude is succeeding. And so I think you probably are right on this, T-Bone, is that's what's hindering our ability to really believe in what we've seen over the last month, or even care about what we've seen over the last month. Is, yeah, they're winning, but none of that is sustainable unless that guy that plays third base and makes $35 million, unless that guy gets going, and none of the rest of it really matters or gets you excited.
And to your point on Gorman, we all don't believe he's doing that for the rest of the season,
same
right?
With Burleson, same with Wynn.
Maybe he does. I have a little more faith in Burley and Wynn just because they're contact hitters. My point on Gorman is though, what you saw in the first month can happen in the third month and the fifth month in a baseball season, because that's Nolan Gorman. Yeah. You know, like, to be a superstar, you have to be able to be a guy that is consistent. Now, I think the way he can become that is be a consistent 40 home run hitter, but he hasn't done that yet. So what I know is coming for Nolan Gorman is there's going to be another month in which he really struggles. So that's why I don't know if his name falls into here. And the reason it's different from a Corbin Carroll, because he was a young player, and I think that's what you're trying to get at with a Mason Wynn and an Alec Burleson. He was like one of the top prospects in all of baseball. Now, yes, Wynn had some prospect pedigree.
That's fair.
Burleson was a top 100 prospect. They weren't Corbin Carroll. You know, Corbin Carroll was a franchise-altering type prospect that was
Jordan
like top
Walker.
5, top 10 in all of baseball. So that's where I would push back a little bit. I think those guys can become stars and can become guys that are in the conversation that I'm talking about with Goldie and Arenado, but they almost have to do it for 2 years, 3 years before you really do that, to when all of a sudden, instead of it being, well, you know, why do you believe in Nolan Arenado? Well, it's Nolan Arenado. It becomes, why do you believe in Mason Wynn? Well, it's Mason Wynn. You can't really say that right now because they're so young in their careers.
Yeah, it's hard to know when that happens. Like, it's hard to, until you see it for a long time, it's hard to claim that guy's going to be that. I was listening to the Roundtable yesterday, the baseball podcast for The Athletic, and they were talking about this in regards to Freddie Freeman. Like, I think sometimes we undervalue that consistency. It's been the case for Paul Goldschmidt, for example, here in St. Louis, and for Nolan Arenado for most of his career, where you look at the back of the baseball card and you know what to expect. At the end of the year, Nolan Arenado's going to hit above 270. He's going to hit 35 home runs. He's going to drive in 100 RBI. Like, every single season. You look at the back of the baseball card with Paul Goldschmidt. He's going to hit like 290. He's going to get on base like 30%, 36% of the time, and he's going to hit for a decent amount of power. And when you have those dudes in the middle of your lineup and you know what it looks like at the end of the year, you don't worry too much about the slumps, because you know what it's going to look like eventually. And you can't say that yet about Burleson, about Gorman, about Wynn, about even Donovan or Nootbaar, anybody like that. Like, you need to see it for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and then you can buy into it. And I think we look at a lot of these players as upside plays. Could Mason Wynn be what we're watching right now? Yeah, it's very possible. This might just be what he's going to be in the big leagues. Maybe Nolan Gorman, this is the year where it clicks for him, and he becomes a 230 hitter that hits 40 home runs for the next 8 seasons. That's possible, but we don't know yet. And the other thing, and I saw this on the text line, and Alex, this might be part of why you're more negatively skewed on the team than what you would otherwise expect.
I am not.
Given the fact that they are 17-10 in their last 27 over the course of the last month. The Cardinals, when you look at what they've done with runners in scoring position, even while winning, it's not good. They're batting .240, and they have a slugging percentage among the bottom in the league at .305. Let me say that one more time. The Cardinals, with runners in scoring position over the last month, when they have been one of the better teams in the league, has a slugging percentage of .305. That is the 4th worst over that stretch in all of baseball. I view that, Alex, and I say that's going to change. I think they will be better in those scenarios than a 305 slugging percentage long term. And if they are, what could end up happening is, yes, Gorman cools down, Burleson cools down, Wynn cools down, Arenado heats up a little bit, Goldie heats up a little bit. And those numbers with the runners in scoring position, if they do get a little bit of a boost and they start hitting for power with runners in scoring position, suddenly it won't matter that those other guys that I just mentioned, the young guys that are on fire right now, it won't matter as much that they are cooling down because you're coming through with runners in scoring position, and it basically comes out in the middle. And if that ends up being the case and they're still winning at this clip, dude, if we look back at the end of the season and they win 15 out of every 25 games, essentially, go 15-10 over every 25-game stretch, we're going to look back and say, hot damn, Cardinals were a lot better than we thought that they were during the course of the regular season.
Yeah, and, you know...
But it doesn't feel that way right now.
No, it doesn't. I mean... Chip Carey last night celebrating a Cardinals victory on Bally Sports Midwest said the Cardinals singled the Pirates to death, and that's how they won. That, to me, doesn't scream like I could believe in this team. And I understand in May they slugged the hell out of the ball, and it felt like they were making strides. But, again, to me, it was a 2.5-week stretch where they did that, and I'm just not ready to put my faith into a team that did it for a couple of weeks. When I can see it for a sustained stretch, that's where it feels to me that I can look at it. And by sustained stretch, I'm talking about over a month. Talking about a couple of months where we see just continued success from the offense, from that power where they're not just coming up with singles and winning games or getting lucky with bounces. They're forcing their way into winning games. And I didn't see that against the Rockies, and it remains to be seen if we can see that today against the Pirates.
And to that point, I think it all comes down to as well, you know, you're not taking advantage. Like every time you build momentum, you somehow squander it.
Yep.
Like they lose 2 or 3 to Chicago White Sox. I don't think they built any momentum before that. I could be wrong. But then you sweep Baltimore, and you take 2 or 3 from Boston, who was really good. You beat the Reds as well.
That was the momentum.
Beat the Cubs.
The momentum was there in that 15-game stretch.
The momentum's there, and then the Cubs series as well. And then you
ished the bed versus Houston's in Colorado.
Had a good baseball team, and Colorado you split with.
They had some momentum, though. Like I think it's fair to say, now, there was one weird game in here, but they had momentum against LA. They end up keeping it back here against Boston, and then they sweep the Baltimore Orioles. They sweep that 2-game set against Chicago. They win 2 out of 3 against Cincinnati. And then where it really fell off was Philly and Houston.
Yeah. And like the Philly one's understandable.
Yeah.
But the Houston one is, okay, Houston's not a good baseball team.
But the Philly one, they weren't. I'm not ready to say Houston's not a good baseball team. I'm ready to say they weren't a good baseball team. I think that might be a team that we look back on 2 months from now and be like, whoa, the hell happened to them at the beginning of the year? Because their bats are starting to heat up. And the Cardinals might have just played them at the exact wrong time. I'm not trying to give you an out here. I think it's more embarrassing that they lost 2 out of 4 against Colorado.
Yeah, but the Philly one to me told me that you're not going to be able to do anything if you get into the playoffs. And I think the Houston Astros running the Colorado Rockies proved to me that you're inconsistent.
Haven't we just seen that can happen?
I just don't buy into that theory. I don't buy into anything can happen if you get into the playoffs.
The Baltimore Orioles.
Yeah, and they're like the best, second best team in the AL.
The Orioles are amazing, dude. I think we are understating how freaking good the Orioles are. They might be the best team in baseball this year. I'm not there. I still think it's Philly. But Baltimore is right there with them. And so the Cardinals did sweep them. That does matter. We have to acknowledge that while also saying when the Cardinals played against the Phillies, they looked like the lesser team. No doubt about it.
I completely get it. And this is going to be Debbie Downer Alex here, so people are going to hate me for it. But to me,
I think a lot of people are with you more than they are.
It's the same thing that happened last year when you took 3 or 4 against the Dodgers.
They beat the Orioles, dude.
I'm not saying that you won games because of luck. I'm saying you fell into a good stretch in 3 games against a really good team.
That's postseason baseball, brother.
You did it in May, though. And I haven't seen this team do anything in September, October in a long time.
I can't see them do it in October until they get there. And so what I'm saying is, like, the evidence that we have seen from them beating Baltimore is a reminder that weird stuff can happen in a 5-game series or a 7-game series in October where, hey, Sonny Gray pitched 2 unbelievable games. Miles Michaelis for 1 game looked like his old former self. And then, boom, your bullpen won you a game and your offense won you a game. And now you're going to the NLCS and nobody saw it happening. Like, that can happen. It feels impossible right now because we've watched this team on a night in, night out basis. But what they did against Baltimore is a reminder for all of us that weird stuff can absolutely happen in October. And this is why general managers, by the way, this is why they operate the way they do, is because they view October as a crapshoot. And I think there are things that team can do to make it less of a crapshoot, and I think Philly's done that. But one of those starters could get hurt, dude. They could have dead arm when we get to October. And suddenly you look at their lineup and one of their big dudes, one of their big boppers, isn't hitting the way that he thought that he was going to. And now they don't look like the same imposing threat that they are currently. JT Realmuto is hurt. We don't know what it's going to look like when he gets back. Right now, Trey Turner is hurt. We don't know what he's going to look like when he gets back. If they lose a couple of their starters, that's not going to be the same team. So it's hard for me right now, while we're in the middle of June, coming off of what was a really good stretch for the Cardinals, to be overly pessimistic when I don't think this is a great team, but I don't think it's a good league. And I think the surrounding teams in the National League right now are opening up in a way that if the Cardinals continue to play just the way they did in the last month, they're going to be right in this thing and probably end up kind of running away with that second wildcard spot.
Hey, man, you don't get pre-mad. I get pre-mad.
That's fair.
And I understand. And most of the time, my pre-mad is warranted.
You're not wrong there. Coming up
I don't have a
next,
review to that.
some NFL quick hitters here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendricks New Year Day Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Big news today here in St. Louis. The St. Louis Blues have announced that Doug Armstrong has signed a contract extension to remain the president of hockey operations through the 2028-2029 season. And Alexander Steen will take over as the general manager in 2026. And if you missed our interview with Doug Armstrong, you can check it out on the podcast page at 101ESPN.com. And the future Blues GM Alexander Steen will join the Fast Lane at 2 o'clock today. And the Cardinals back in action here in just about 30 minutes as they wrap up their 3-game set with the Pittsburgh Pirates. 1:15 will be first pitch. Mitch Keller will get the start for the Pirates. Lance Lynn will be on the mound for St. Louis. The Sports Update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, let's start with this. Did you see the news announced earlier today that the wide receiver show is going to be coming to Netflix in about a month?
No, but I am interested. You want personality. It is the wide receiver position.
So Justin Jefferson is apparently going to be featured in this.
Makes sense with all of his money. Need more.
Is this something you guys are going to be watching? This is basically the same idea as what we saw last year with the quarterback documentary. I know T-Bone thought it was totally overrated. I totally disagree with him.
Sorry, your Holmes is boring.
Receiver is the new one. It's going to be Justin Jefferson, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel.
Oh, yeah, I'm out on that. I don't think you got any interesting personalities on that one.
Devontae Adams and Amon-Ra St. Brown also will be in it.
I need somebody who's a train wreck to watch. And I don't think you have anybody on that team that's train wreck worthy.
Well, who was that in quarterback?
It wasn't. I didn't think that was very interesting either.
Oh, you didn't like it?
No, because Mahomes is boring as ish.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was great.
Well, of course you did, man. You got posters of them all over your house.
I just thought if I was a neutral observer, I thought they did a really good job with it. And I thought Kirk Cousins was the star of it, not Patrick Mahomes.
I think Deebo Samuel could be drama worthy with this whole ongoing contract situation, but I don't know. None of those guys.
You don't find George Kittle to be interesting?
No,
George Kittle's one of the best personalities in the NFL right now.
Because he goes to wrestling games and he has a belt?
No, because he just says interesting stuff. Okay. Well, you weren't the target demo, apparently.
Well, no, obviously not. I mean, that's the position.
Who could they have got that you would have been interested in? If these guys don't do it for you, I think the answer was you're just not going to be interested. Am I wrong on that?
No, probably not. I mean, Tyreek Hill would be pretty interesting.
Well, yeah, they weren't going to do that. They weren't going to feature a guy that has been accused many times of domestic violence, and
that wasn't the range I was going towards.
I know,
was
but
more
they weren't going to feature that guy on this.
Yeah, but honestly, if you want me to watch, that's probably what's going to get me invested. Somebody
it's just Tyreek Hill.
Not just Tyreek Hill, but somebody of that ilk.
Yeah.
And see, now you made me look like I want to watch somebody who has been accused of domestic violence.
No.
I'm just saying Tyreek Hill to me is he's
got a personality.
He's a more interesting personality than, and maybe I'm underplaying George Kittle. I don't find George Kittle very interesting though.
Yeah, I watched the trailer when they released it today, and I thought, okay, some of those guys might be interesting. I think Justin Jefferson's going to be a guy that could be interesting. I don't know about St. Brown. Kittle, I think, will be good.
Monroe is very serious.
Yeah, I don't, and Devontae Adams, I don't really care. He's kind of buried in Las Vegas.
To me.
I think the two that have a chance to be really good are Justin Jefferson and then George Kittle, and maybe Deebo. Deebo had a little bit of some personality in the trailer, but not a lot. But I think it'll be okay. I don't think this is going to be great.
I think they try to do too many. I think if you're doing something like this, one thing that I really liked about the quarterback documentary is they had Patrick Mahomes, who was clearly the star. They were focused on him for obvious reasons. They wanted him to be the guy that ended up getting other people to do this. And then Kirk Cousins was their secondary player, and I thought he was really good in it. And then they also had Marcus Mariota featured.
Yeah,
he was also here.
It's really two guys.
And if you're going to do this, I think you need to have it featured on one or two guys for the most part. I think what could end up happening is this becomes too fractured and you end up losing all of the plot. It just ends up becoming a bunch of dudes that are saying a couple of things, and each individual episode isn't all that interesting. The best part of the quarterback documentary was following these guys throughout the NFL season. I don't know that you're going to have that same ability when you have this many different players that you're trying to follow over the course of the year. You end up just checking in with them for 5 or 7 minutes in each individual episode, and that to me is not as compelling. So I will watch it. I will find it probably to be entertaining because I I love football, and seeing the behind-the-scenes stuff is cool to me. But I think they tried to do a little bit too much, in my opinion, with 4 guys on this one.
Yeah, I think anytime you get the behind-the-scenes stuff, it is interesting because you see what goes on in their day-to-day lives. It's just a matter of, is it going to keep you interested? Because after you see the first episode, if the personalities don't keep you interested, then you saw it and you're like, okay, cool, moving on.
Yeah, if they would have had Justin Jefferson, George Kittle, and I would have liked to have seen them go with like a lesser wide receiver. This wouldn't have been a headliner, but you got the headliner. Justin Jefferson's your headliner for this.
Yeah.
They had just like a number 3 or number 4 wide receiver who was like a role guy trying to make it.
Get the dude from Pittsburgh that was so angry last year. Pickens?
George Pickens?
Yeah, go get Pickens. I'll watch that.
One of those guys, I think, would have been a good way to go about it because you see the different ways of life. That was one thing that I really liked about last year's quarterbacks that they selected was you had the star, you had the middle of the road veteran, and you had a guy that was just trying to keep his job with Marcus Mariota. And it showed you what the differences are at each level of the position. You're not going to get that with these receivers that they decided to select.
No coincidence, the guy in the 3rd category keeping his job had the most gray hair of the 3.
He also ended up not being on the show by the end because he went MIA.
Yeah.
Literally went MIA.
Look what that show did to him.
All right. Let's continue along here with another thing for NFL quick hitters. Alex, yesterday, Minnesota Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell said that Sam Darnold will continue to take the reps as the starting quarterbacks whenever they report for training camp. How long do you think it's going to take before they put J.J. McCarthy as their starter?
1 week. If Sam Darnold's outperforming J.J. McCarthy, which, by the way, I don't think it's true. You just don't want to. You want to slow play McCarthy, which I get. It's going to take 1 week of watching Sam Darnold look like he's seeing ghosts on the field and put J.J. McCarthy in that game.
Yeah, I'm kind of in line with Alex. I don't know if it's going to be 1 week, but I could see you at like week 4, week 5. That's typically when you really start to see the pressure go on these head coaches that want to try this. No, he's going to wait in the wings behind the guy that's really bad. That's typically about week 4, week 5 is when you really start to see them consider making a change.
First game that Justin Jefferson is either underthrown or overthrown, he's going to go to the coach and say, put J.J. McCarthy in. And then he'll also get underthrown or overthrown.
That could be something, by the way, that's interesting about this Justin Jefferson aspect to the
That's probably why they did it, to be honest with you.
He had like 7 quarterbacks throwing him the ball last year. I have to imagine he got a little frustrated at a certain point. So they opened the season with the New York Giants. Their week 2 opponent
Darnold
is
looked
San
in that
Francisco.
game. Oh, not that game.
And then Houston, and then Green Bay, and then the Jets. After the bye, here's what it looks like, Alex. Detroit, the Rams, the Colts, the Jaguars, the Titans, the Chicago Bears, Arizona, Atlanta. I think they wait until after the bye. I think they see the schedule and say, we don't need him going up against San Francisco and Houston and the New York Jets defenses. That is not a good way for him to go out there and have success. Detroit, the Rams, the Colts, the Titans, the Jaguars. Okay, we can have some success against those.
What? Against Detroit?
Their defense?
The Rams?
The defense is upgraded, man.
It'll be fine. Their defense should be better when it was one of the worst in the league
loses
last
to
year.
them.
Oh, I'm not saying they're going to win, but I'm saying like you'll have a better chance for success for J.J. McCarthy against the Lions defense.
Yeah, sure, with
than
Aiden
against
Hutchinson breathing down your
the
throat.
49ers and the Jets.
I would say the
I feel pretty
Lions are
confident
a
in that.
better position to hurt you than the Jets defensively.
I do not agree with that at all. I think the Jets have a top 5 defense in the NFL.
I think Aiden Hutchinson is going to make J.J. McCarthy eat turf the entire game.
Can you name 2 other players on their defense?
Yeah, Terry and Arnold, and who's
look at me, I
the
can't.
guy that they got from Tampa? Why am I blanking on his name right now?
You got to.
And they're
Winfield? Was that his name? Winfield?
Carlton Davis.
Huh?
Winfield's still in
I knew
Tampa,
it was
think.
a secondary
Carlton
player.
Davis, yeah. They don't have a very good defense. I'm
All I'm upset about is
sternly in support of
keep
that.
my team's name
The Rams
out
are going
of
to be a
your
cakewalk.
mouth.
The Rams game is going to be a cakewalk for him.
Coming up in 15 minutes, who were the Blues' top performers relative to their cap hit a year ago? Alex, The Athletic has some thoughts on this. I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say they probably disagree with your opinion on it. So we'll get into that coming up at the top of the hour. The Junk Drawer is next here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, let's dive into the junk drawer. Alex, what do you got for us
No
today?
butt stories today, so
Please.
congrats to all of you. Little respect because Army was on with us earlier today. No, I have a what would you do in this situation?
Don't know how the two are connected, but I'll go
Just
with
leave
it.
me alone, okay? So I'm at the grocery store, and of course, this is where this takes place. Did my weekly grocery shopping moment. No, this isn't a I got angry. This is a what would you do in this situation? So I'm with my girls. Food's in the cart. We're putting it on the conveyor belt while the lady's starting to scan us out. What?
Just like that you call it a conveyor belt.
Isn't that what it is? It's a conveyor belt?
Yeah, it'll work.
I don't know what it's actually.
What's it called, Mr. Analytics?
It doesn't matter. Go
Give
ahead.
me the analytical Webster definition of it.
I'd feel bad for even questioning it. Go ahead.
Only
First, you backed me
Brandon,
into a corner with the
whatever's
Tyreek
middle
Hill
name-
comment.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Brandon, whatever's middle name is Kylie, would bring up that.
Oh, his middle name's totally Gary.
Michael.
Even worse.
I almost said Michael.
I'm me and like 80% of the U.S. population.
Anyway, because of the Tone Ranger over here who jumped in the middle of my statement. So I'm at the checkout line.
Okay.
Jerk.
Putting stuff on the conveyor belt,
Food's
right?
on the conveyor belt. She's checking me out, and the lady walks up behind me. And, I mean, my cart is still like 3/4 of the way full. I'm putting stuff on this. My girls are helping me, and so I'm letting them take their time. This lady walks up. She immediately puts down that little divider and starts putting her food on the conveyor belt. Just starts filling it up. And there's no space. And I mean, again, I've got 3/4 of a thing full, so I'm starting to stack all of my groceries on top of each other. I don't know what to do because it wasn't like there was only 2 things that I could just pick up and move back. And I didn't know how to say it without sounding like BK and be like, hey, ma'am, do you mind putting your stuff back in your cart while I'm pulling on the... So I just start stacking everything, and this clerk she was getting pissed.
I'm way too passive-aggressive to say something. Wait, you guys know me well enough, I feel like, at this point, to know I'm not saying anything to that
See,
woman.
I think people would have assumed I would have, but that lady looked like she was having a really bad day. So I
Probably in a hurry.
So I didn't know what to do. But it's like I'm not going to be rude and yell at my girls because they're one to help put food up. And so we're not going slow. I'm letting them do one while I'm putting the rest up there. But there's no space. And so this lady's frozen chicken
making me squeak.
it starts backing mine up.
Over here.
And so I've got this tight space. And the grocery store clerk knew what I was doing. She saw it, and she was getting frustrated because I'm stacking stuff. And so a couple of times I just scooted her stuff back, and she kept huffing and puffing. So I didn't know what to do. So anyway, we got through it.
I think at a certain point, you have to say something. It would have made me so uncomfortable. I do not like public disagreements. It's not like if you're gonna do it, cool, good on you. But like my dad growing up, this used to bother me. We'd go to a restaurant, and if something was wrong with his food, he would say something, and it made me want to melt into the chair.
That's not terrible.
No, dude. If I go to a
I thought you were
restaurant,
gonna say like he'd like leave and not tip.
I'm
or
a
something.
total pushover. If I go to a restaurant and I order, like, let's say I'm going to a Mexican restaurant, right? I ordered 3 tacos. I get 3 enchiladas. Cool, I'll eat the enchiladas. I'm fine. I ordered beef and I got chicken.
See, that's crazy.
Fine.
You have to send it back. If they get your order wrong, you send it back.
No, if you undercooked my meat, overcooked my meat, it's fine.
See,
That's not pushing back, though, man. I'm paying money.
Yeah,
I'm good.
I have a problem with
that's
that.
different.
I went somewhere just a couple of weeks ago, and this is one that made me uncomfortable that I would never do. The place was swarmed, and then they didn't have a ton of help, so this guy's working probably extra tables than he should, and he's taking a little longer. My family just sits there. We're having a conversation. We don't really care. We're in no rush. Somebody was clearly in a rush, and they scream at the top of their lungs, "Can we go ahead and order already?" And the poor guy had to walk over there in the,
he
head
got spit in
down.
his food.
Or I would have. I felt so bad for the guy. And then he came over to us. He's like, "Guys, I'm so sorry." We're like, "Dude, hey, don't worry about it.
That
I get it. You're
sucks,
doing your
dude.
job, man. It's busy. It's crazy. You don't need to yell at the guy and tell him, hey, let's hurry up. Your situation, I don't know what I would.
I hate people like that, man. Like, there's no reason to disrespect somebody in the term of having a tone like that.
I think BK would have said something, by the way.
Yeah. No, BK
I
wouldn't
don't
have.
think it would have been like a super aggressive,
Are you
like, what
talking-
the hell are you doing?
Are you talking about at the grocery store? Going back to that? Yeah,
I think BK would have made a comment like...
There would have been a point in time in which I do. I would have started out doing exactly what Alex did, where I just start stacking stuff on my own stuff. But eventually, if I run out of room, I would say, "Excuse me, I wasn't finished. Do you mind if I push your stuff back a little bit?" That would be the way that I would phrase it.
And so,
I think he would have said something the moment she put the thing down. I think I'm done, huh?
And so, well, yeah, that's what my
That's what I would say to the two of you. If it's a stranger, I would never talk to them like that. I don't know what that says
I
about
don't
me.
believe you.
the devil on my shoulder was thinking, pick up her chicken and throw it back in her cart and say, I'm not done yet. But it didn't. And so I think I understood what she was doing. because she probably thought was like, stop letting your kids put stuff on the thing. You need to go get in, get out.
Sure.
But again, my daughters were picking up like bags of carrots and putting it on there while I was doing everything else. And there was no
That's a tough spot, man.
There's no grace period. I really just wanted to be like, ma'am, can you just put it back in the cart?
Wow.
I would have wanted to crawl into a ball. That's what I would have wanted.
got in the
Just
car.
crawl underneath the conveyor belt and just not have to deal
And
with
it's
the
like, I want to
situation.
teach my kids how to handle that situation properly, but then it's like, man, I can either go the ultimatum one way or I could just be passive aggressive and say nothing.
Social anxiety is a hell of a thing.
It is, man. It is.
really is.
But good for that lady. She got her groceries done.
Coming up in 15 minutes, it is time for Believe It or Not. If you guys have anything you'd like to throw in, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. But coming up next, who were the Blues' top performers when you take into account their salary cap charge from last year? The Athletic has 3 nominees. I'm going to see what Alex's nominees are, and we'll compare the 2 lists to see how many of them line up. We'll do that next year on 101 ESPN. Do you feel like you're getting the same amount out of your workouts today as you did 5, 10, 15 years ago? If the answer to that question is no, it may be due to low testosterone. This is something that I had to check out just the other day as well. Victory Men's Health is the place that I went. They unlock your inner champion. I booked my appointment online. I went onto their website, and it's super easy. You put in your name, email, phone number, and exactly what it is that you're looking for. They'll get you back with a phone call, and they'll set up your appointment. It's a super easy process. That first appointment that you have with Victory Men's Health, they're going to do a lab draw to be able to find out exactly where your levels are with testosterone, with all of your micronutrients. And then you're going to go back and you're going to have a consult, and they'll tell you where all your numbers are, and they'll proceed forward with you with the best plan possible to unlock your inner champion. It's at Victory Men's Health. You can check them out today. They've got 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, and you can read all about what they can do to unlock your inner champion at Victory Men's Health. That's Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com. All right, Alex. The Athletic put out another article. No, it is not by your friend Dom, but it's using his numbers. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. The article is breaking down who the best performer was relative to their cap hit on each team in the Western Conference. So, just as an example for you, if you looked at the Nashville Predators this season, the best contract based upon their cap hit, according to The Athletic,
Say Ryan O'Reilly.
was Roman Josi.
Oh, that makes
Now,
sense.
he's making $9 million, which is a lot of money, but even compared to that cap hit, he was so unbelievable that he was their best performer relative to their cap. Now, one of the nominees was Ryan O'Reilly. He finished in second on this list.
Ah, that's good.
When you look at the St. Louis Blues, Alex, they had 3 potential candidates for the best performer on the team relative to their 2024 cap hit. I want to first hear what your list would look like if you were putting together the best performers this past season relative to cap hit. And then I'll give you what theirs were. And I think we can have an interesting discussion about this. So who would you have on that list?
So I would have Colton Parayko on this list. I would have Jordan Binnington on this list. And I would put Robert Thomas on this list. Those are the 3 guys to me because Parayko played like a guy who should be paid somewhere between $8 to $9 million in terms of ice time, going up against the best talent, everything that he did, and where he finished the season. Jordan Binnington played better than Sergei Bobrovsky in the regular season, and he's making $11 million while Binnington's making $6 million. And I'd put Thomas up there because Thomas played against the best and was a point-per-game player and a positive in the plus-minus. Those would be the 3 guys that should be on this list.
I would have had 2 other players that are different than yours on my list.
Kyrou would be on it.
Nope. I would have had Jake Neighbors on my list.
Agreed.
Yep.
And I would have had Alexei Toropchenko on my list. $1.2 million for the production that you got out of Alexei Toropchenko last year when he was playing up and down the lineup and was really productive
I
for
think
you.
those are very fair, too.
I would have had them on my list along with Thomas and Benner, probably. Those would have been my 4.
It's interesting because I would have put Hofer on the list too. I think Hofer
Hofer's a
outplayed
good
for
one,
a
too.
guy that played at league minimum.
Of all of the names that we just mentioned, how many do you think were a part of the Athletics
One.
list?
None.
One.
Who was it?
It's Robert Thomas. And Robert Thomas was their choice. The best bang for your buck contract relative to cap hit on the Blues in 2024, according to The Athletic, was Robert Thomas. Makes a lot of sense. He was excellent. He makes $8 million. He's probably worth 9 or 10 based on his performance from a year ago. The other 2 nominees, though, I found to be laughable, Alex.
So the one that I'm guessing they had on there is Nick Leddy.
Nope.
Wow.
You want to guess any more? I'll let you do this all day long.
Keep going.
If there's another damn defenseman on that list, I'm going to be
Was
livid.
Krug on there?
There is a defenseman, but it's not.
Oh, Kessel.
Corey Krug. Nope.
Oh, wow. Kessel probably should be on that list.
Is it Falk?
No.
Who else was on that third?
Scandella?
Nope. Keep going,
If
buddy.
it's,
Perunovic?
if it's Tyler Tucker.
Yeah, I wondered if his offensive numbers
Perunovic.
was.
Even play half the season.
Quote, Scott Perunovic grades well by the model because the Blues won the even strength goal share battle during his minutes. But by the eye, he struggled more than the numbers would have otherwise indicate.
And welcome to why I hate analytics.
Diminutive offensive defender has enough potential to warrant another NHL look, but he still has plenty of room to grow defensively.
So stupid. So
So
the
Thomas and Perunovic were 2 of them.
is Booch the other one?
Booch is the 3rd.
That makes sense. I mean, again, analytically, they're going to tell you. I think the eye test would tell you that he wasn't.
I thought he was good this year.
I think it was good, but I think he was like
great. That would be my kind of counter to those numbers.
I'm shocked Jake Neighbors wasn't on this list.
Same.
Absolutely shocked he wasn't on this list. I know analytically he did not grade out particularly well this year. I don't care.
But why?
The guy was awesome. The on ice advanced numbers of goal shares and Corsi and all of the nerdy numbers that nobody wants to look at. Like, the dude was a good player. He scored a bunch of goals. He produced on the power play. That guy was awesome.
Well, and I think you got to isolate it too with Neighbors. Neighbors played half the season on the 4th line and the 3rd line, and then like half of the season he played in the top line.
And he made $850,000. He was on a rookie level, entry level deal. So I would have him probably as the one that wins this. He to me was the best bang for your buck bargain from a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the one that should win it would be Binnington because Binnington was an MVP, and for $6 million, goaltenders are getting paid north of $8 or $9 million, like to be a number 1 guy, and you're paying this guy $6 million. There are like mid B goaltenders in the NHL that are making close to $6 million. So he'd be the one that would be on that list.
I figured it out. I skipped right to the Blues one, so this is on me. I did the thing that I hate when people do it, and I apologize.
Oh, you didn't read?
I didn't read the beginning of it where they said entry-level deals are not included. That explains it. Yeah, that explains why they wouldn't have included Jake Neighbors on this list.
Makes a lot of sense then.
I still disagree with some of them. I would not have, for example, Scott Perunovich anywhere near my list of bang for your buck.
And isn't that still an entry-level contract? That was still his first contract.
It was a bridge deal, wasn't it? Didn't he have the entry-level deal and then he signed the bridge?
They just signed him to a 1-year deal.
Yeah, and I think that was technically considered to be like a bridge, if I'm not mistaken, because he had already hit RFA status, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because he had 2 years
year.
of the RFA.
So that would be the reason why. As you look,
that's such a stupid list.
As you look towards the future, though, Alex, and you think about guys that can be bang for the buck in the future. Who on the Blues right now do you think fits into that criteria based on your projection of what they're going
Thomas,
to be?
For sure. I think Thomas is going to be the way that the cap is going, Thomas by 2026, 2027 is going to be a player that if he were on the market would be making $10 or $11 million. Because I think he's going to be in Selke conversations. He's going to probably put up somewhere between 80 and 90 points. He's definitely going to be on this list. I would say Jake Neighbors is going to outperform whatever his next contract is. And then I personally would still put Colton Parayko on that list in the future. I think he's the type of player that plays the style that other teams would pay $8-9 million, because Darnell Nurse is making $9.5 million and is playing second pair minutes for the Oilers in the playoffs. Colton Parayko on that team would be on their top line playing with Evan Bouchard. So those would be the three if I'm projecting out. And honestly, what Tebow mentioned, Joel Hofer. I think Joel Hofer's bridge contract after next season is probably going to be somewhere between $2-2.5 million. That dude's going to be a number one making less than $3 million.
I know nobody wants to hear me say it, but if he's what the Blues think he is, Jordan Kyrou will be the same. Jordan Kyrou can absolutely fall into that, being a guy that could be a 40-goal scorer in 26-27, making the same cap hit, to your point on Robert Thomas. Those two guys could end up becoming one of the best bargains in the NHL.
Kyrou's got to be a 40-goal scorer to be that. And I'm not talking like almost there. I think you got to be a 40-goal scorer. But you're a one-trick pony. You're doing one thing. You're scoring goals. And if you're not scoring 40-plus goals with a guy who has the potential to have a 100-point season in Robert Thomas, you're not.
What did you say the cap's going to be in a few years?
95, 97. I think that's what Pierre LeBrun reported.
So if the cap's going to be, let's call it $95 million, and that's the first year that that we're going to have Alex Steen as the GM, right?
You're talking about probably like a 8 cap percent,
8.4% of the cap. So right now that would be like making $7 million. Would I be okay with what Jordan Kyrou did this year if he made $7 million instead of 8.1? Yeah. Braden Shin made 6.5 this year, dude. Braden Shin was essentially against the cap this year what Jordan Kyrou will be against the cap 3 years down the road. And would I be okay at that point in time if Kyrou is a more productive player then than Braden Shin was this year? I understand Shin brings other stuff. Totally fair. Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that will be considered to be a bargain value contract. It's going to take a while to get there. Right now, it's not. As of today, it's not a bargain contract. Right now, he's making probably a little more than what he's worth. But the reason why I think it was smart for Doug Armstrong to make such a long-term commitment to Kyrou is because eventually it will be, and so it never loses value as a trade asset, if nothing else. I know he's got the no-trade clause, which complicates things, but if you end up getting to a place where you need to move him or you want to move him, there will still be value out there for other teams because he is that goal scorer that you were mentioning there, Alex. So I still think he'll be a bang for your buck, but I would have Benner, Parayko, Thomas, Kyrou, Neighbors on my list. That would be my
entry-level contracts don't count.
I probably should have read
I'd have Dvorsky on that list.
Sure. Why not? Kessel. We all know Kessel's the real answer.
Actually, Matt Kessel probably is going to be the real Kessel.
Definitely should have read that part.
It's fine, man.
It's a bad job by me.
Sometimes people don't need to read. I've said that through my entire high school career.
You know, this is a good moment for me because I get frustrated when people like take articles and take stuff out of context.
Yeah, sure. You're going to grow from this after the amount of tone problems we've had on this show, and you're going to grow from this moment.
I'll be better at this.
Okay.
Don't kid yourself, man.
Okay, tough guy.
I won't be better with the tone, but I'll be better with this.
I don't believe you.
Coming up in 15 minutes.
I don't either.
Speaking of tone.
What can the Cardinals learn for the Blue Jays?
T-Bone got there. We just stared at each other for 10 seconds until he got there.
My defense, I typically never know what's on our rundown.
T-Bone, we're going to play a game of Believe It or Not here on 101 ESPN.
I knew when I used Rhino Shield that it was going to change the way that my house looked from the outside and people would see it and notice it. I didn't know it was going to be to the level that it was. Last weekend, we had a neighborhood garage sale, and so we had stuff out on our driveway, and probably about 7 or 8 people walked by and said, "Where'd you get this done? Did you do this yourself?" And explained to them that, nope, this was all Rhino Shield's work. And the reason that they were so surprised by it is I told them that it was painted 3 years ago. They thought I just completed the work because it looks brand new, and that's the coating process that Rhino Shield uses. It's not paint that you buy from the hardware store because it sticks 8 to 10 times thicker than any other paint you're going to buy. It's a 2 to 3 coating process with ceramic coating that can weather whatever type of element comes your way. It's 100% waterproof. It deflects 90% of the UV rays, and it sticks to whatever siding you have. Asbestos, block, brick, cedar, stucco, all of it can stick with Rhino Shield, and you get a brand new looking home thanks to their work. Give Darren a call today. It was easy process. He walked us through it. His team was out that weekend, had it painted, and we were done by Sunday, and it looks brand new. 877-25-RHINO. Tell him Alex Ferrario sent you. 877-25RHINO.com.
Got a little food stuff.
I got
in
what
my
you were
throat.
talking about.
Yeah, you did.
Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so
Free, flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be?
Believe it or not, it's just me.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. For Believe It or Not, you give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are believing it or not here on 101 ESPN. Alex has been dying, and I mean dying, to talk about this over the last week. So I'm going to give him the opportunity to do so. Alex, believe it or not, the Blues will trade up in this year's NHL draft.
Dude, you just stole my believe it or not. What a jerk. What a jerk. Damn it, man. You're the Cardinals guy. Well, believe it or not, the Cardinals are going to win the NL Central. That's what yours are. I'll believe it, by the way. There's 3 teams right now in the top 11 that are basically saying, yeah, we'll trade this. And I know BK is like, well, that tells you what the draft pool is. You shouldn't do it. I think a lot of the reason why these teams are willing to do it is because they realize a drafted player is not helping them right now. And all 3 of these teams, Ottawa, Buffalo, and New Jersey, they realize this next year, you got to do something. And a 10th overall pick, an 11th overall pick, a 7th overall pick's not going to do it. If the right deal presents itself, I would absolutely trade up, especially Ottawa at number 7 is so enticing to me. You have the makings of a pure blockbuster offseason trade with the Ottawa Senators because they've got forwards that could be available, they've got defensemen that could be available, and they've got the 7th overall pick that could be available. So I'll believe it.
They have 4 defensemen over on The Athletic ranked. Corey Pronman put out a piece earlier today on how players from this year's draft would compare to last year's draft in terms of the draft rankings. They have 4 defensemen in this year's class that would rank at or above the top defensemen that they had ranked in last year's draft. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So they've got
Anton Silyayev or Artem
Lavushnov.
There we go. Gotcha, buddy.
That's the one. And Silyayev.
I love that guy.
Silyayev.
That's my Mongoon. I'm never going to get him.
He's also rated up there. And then Zeev Bium. Mm-hmm. And then
it's a car going by.
The other one is Sam Dickinson. I can say that one.
That's a good one, man. That's a good one.
So those 4 defensemen are all rated at or above their top defensemen from a year ago.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 more, and I mean, I'm not going to second guess.
Simashev was rated below them.
Simashev is the one that the Coyotes took that I was like, what the hell are they doing right now? I think there's 2 more that, and again, Pronman and Wheeler know exactly what they're talking about, but I would say there's 2 more that have number 1 or top pair upside, and it's this Yakimchuk that's available.
They don't like him.
Huh?
They don't have him rated.
Well, that's great. It could be dropping down to you. And there's this Swede, which no surprise to anybody. Sounds like he's got top pair upside.
Where's he from?
Sweden.
That's who the Blues are.
Bank on the Blues drafting that individual is what I'm saying.
Alex, what do you got for us today on?
You should probably pass me here, buddy.
Guys, believe it or not, with Alexander Steen being named the future GM of the St. Louis Blues, it makes it more likely that Pavel Buchnevich will sign a contract extension.
Is this, believe it or not, or more likely to happen?
It's a combo.
Oh, my God, a remix.
It's like a burger and fries.
I'm going to say not believe, because it's more likely that he signs. I'm going to say not believe it. As much as Doug made it clear in his press conference at the end of the season how much he loves Buch and feels like that's a winning player, I do believe that Doug is going to have Alexander Steen a part of that process. And unless the terms are at the level that Doug Armstrong and Alexander Steen deem fit, I could see them saying, you know what, it's not going to make sense. And because there's so many teams that are willing to wheel and deal this offseason, I think if he's not willing to accept their offer, that's when they could pull the trigger on something.
You know when Alex Steen really hit his prime here in St. Louis?
2012? 11, 12?
I would say 11, 12 is probably right in that range.
That was where he was pushing for 40 goals.
2014, he was 29 years old, 33 goals, 62 points. The next year, 30 years old, 24 goals, 65 points. The next year, in 67 games, 17 goals, 52 points, and then 51 points, 46 points. I'm through his age 33 season. I'm going to believe this. I think that my opinion on this will change a little bit if we get any kind of indicators that Steen is becoming a little more involved in the process. I wonder if Buch reminds Steen a little bit of himself in terms of the player that
is
he
exactly why I asked this question, because that's who he reminds me a little of.
Because he's got some similarities. He plays in every situation. He's an all-around player. He's a little bit of a throwback in that regard. He's not like physical, but he does play a puck possession game. I could see Steen being a big supporter of having Buchnevich around long term. So I'll say believe it, but I don't know the answer to that on how involved he will be this offseason. Army seemed to push back on that a little bit earlier today when we talked to him about it.
The reason I asked this, and the reason I believe it, is because he reminds me a little of Steen, and I assume Steen valued his role when he was a Blue, of being what you said, be the guy that kind of plays the all-around style of game. I think it makes it more likely, and again, unless we get indicators that say otherwise, I think it changes some of the philosophy in what you see with Pavel Buchnevich. And Army kind of raved about Buch as well at times. So I think there might be some kind of those two agree on, hey, you probably need that guy, but it does come down to price point. But I would say believe this.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. By the way, I mentioned it a little bit ago. We did have Doug Armstrong on the show earlier today. Right after his press conference availability, he joined us here on BK and Ferrario. If you missed it, check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you can go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
And coming up at 2 o'clock, the Fast Lane will have Alexander Steen on the show right at the top of their show. So stick around. 2 o'clock, the Fast Lane will have Alex Steen to talk about his new responsibilities.
We're going to have
organization.
We're going to have Perron tonight on the Last Minute Blues podcast, and we'll be able to talk to Perron, obviously, who played 2 separate terms in his career with Steen, to get his thoughts on that.
Fantastic. Looking forward to that. So don't go anywhere. 101 ESPN has you covered with the news of the day that Alex Steen has been hired as the next general manager of the St. Louis Blues. All right, let's go to the text line for Believe It or Not. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 636. Guys, believe it or not, the Florida Panthers will sweep the Edmonton Oilers.
I originally said not believe this because I thought Edmonton would pick up a game. I'm starting to lean more towards a sweep now because I don't know how I feel about Edmonton going into this game. It sounds like Darnell Nurse and Evander Kane are still hurt, might not play in this one. Barkov is back, and the fact that Draisaitl made that move against Barkov in game 2, which people that don't know, he basically went and elbowed him in the head, and there were no repercussions of that. There was no suspension, no fine or anything like that from the player development. I think Florida's going to be an extra level of pissed off, and if I got to be honest with you, I don't think Edmonton's got an answer for Barkov, for Tkachuk, for these guys that find ways to eliminate them. So I'm going to believe this. I think this is over in 4 games.
Yeah, I'm still not going to believe it. I think McDavid and Draisaitl are too good, and they've been held in check for a big chunk of this series in the first 2 games. I think at some point they break through. I think they probably break through in game 3. But with that being said, I still think Florida wins this in 5 games. I just don't believe in a sweep. But if it's a 5-game series, talk about one of the most boring NBA Finals and Stanley Cup final combo we've had in a while. Because the Finals is going to be a sweep. And the Panthers just look like too dominant a team for the Oilers.
And
that it could be 4 or 5.
Everybody was so excited for this matchup. And like we talked about originally with it, I really wondered what the narrative was going to be when McDavid and Draisaitl can't pick up a win, or if only win once.
All right, guys, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Believe it or not, Jason Tatum will win MVP of the NBA Finals.
What did he do? I don't know. What did he do last night?
He was good last night, but
he was good.
The story from the game, I was going to say, the story from the game was Jaylen Brown. I mean, he closed out both game 1 and game 2 with this performance.
Jaylen Brown looks awesome. I could make an argument for Drew Holiday, by the way.
Yeah.
Drew Holiday has been fantastic, and he's been the guy that is defending the best players on the Mavs. Whenever they need a stop, they put Drew Holiday on their number 1 creator in that spot.
I think if Porzingis wouldn't have got injured, he'd be in the running for it too. But after his performance from game 2, but he gets injured, obviously that takes you out of that whole conversation.
I think it's Jaylen Brown.
I do too.
I agree.
I can't see Tatum getting it. I just think Brown's been the best player in that series, and to your point, it's not even close. And Tatum disappeared in game 2 or game 1? One of those games, like, he was a really good playmaker, but he wasn't the guy they went to for scoring. So I'm not going to believe this.
Yeah, I think it was game 2, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's
game
right.
2, and he had some turnovers in that game as well. I don't think he's been great so far in this series. I think he's been good. I don't think he's been great. I think their depth is what's helping them win this series.
Tatum's been the one that's been kind of one-on-one with Luka most of the series, though, right? And I mean, like, to Tatum's credit, he has locked down Luka to some extent. Like last game, what was he like?
Luka hasn't exactly helped himself.
No, not absolutely, but like last game, he was 1 for 7, 1 from 8 from the 3-point line, and like that's where his bread and butter is.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 661. Believe it or not, the fries are actually more important than the burger when it comes to a combination.
Oh, this is a great
damn,
text.
this is a good one.
I would say not believe it, because if you get a really good burger, it can that's the main part of the course, so it can wash away bad fries.
I would say believe it. I think there are more
too.
places that I would go to because of the fries than the burger.
Here's the thing.
Really? I can't say that.
Here's my theory with it.
I think most burgers are pretty good. There are not a lot of them that I'm like, I'm not going there because of their burger. I am going there because of the burger. Fries would set it apart.
If the
for me.
burger sucks, I can wash it down with fries and forget about the burger being bad.
I can't, 'cause
If the
it's the main
fries
meal.
suck, and most time burgers aren't that great. If the fries suck, I got nothing to turn to, and that meal is awful.
I disagree. You know, if you have a bad main course, you don't just wash that away with a side. So I'm going to believe this.
Alex, well, last one here from the 314. Believe it or not, because the Blues have a GM coming in Alex Steen, David Perron will be more open to re-signing here in St. Louis this offseason.
You know what? We'll find out that answer later on tonight with Last Minute Blues podcast. No, I'm going to say not believe this
I
one.
was about to say, I don't think you're going to be asking that.
No, we won't. I'm not going to believe this. I think that ship has sailed for David Perron after the outcome of this last contract negotiation. It sure seemed like he loved his time in Detroit, and Steve Yzerman was obsessed with him. I wouldn't be surprised if David Perron finished his career with the Detroit Red Wings. What I do see happening is when David Perron retires, signing a one-day contract and retiring as a Blue.
That guy should retire a Blue in a Blues uniform.
And play. I'm with you. I think that ship has sailed from the Blues' perspective, and honestly, I have to imagine that bridge was burned with the last negotiation between Perron and Army.
He's not going to get a long-term deal. Right? How old is Perron, by the
One,
way?
maybe 2 years.
He's probably going to get a 2-year deal from Detroit.
Yeah, and he's, how old is Perron now?
33?
36.
No, 30. Oh, yeah, he might be 36.
36.
Yeah, I
Hot
won't
damn.
believe this. If he was younger, like if he was like 33, I would believe this. I could see where you bring him in as like a fourth-line guy in 2 years when you're hoping to kind of start your winning window. Steen knows him well, can mend some bridges that may have been burned and say, hey, man, we need someone like you as a leader on this team.
What I would give
Come
for
play
him
on
to
the
be in that
fourth line.
cap and roll from last year.
I mean, if I were the
Third line, put him on the power play, boom.
If I were the Blues, I'd learned from my mistakes this last season, and I would either go to him or I'd go to Pat Maroon and say, like, what do we need to get you back? Because if there's anything that is substantial for this Blues team within the next 2 years, it's rebuilding that foundation that we've talked a lot about. And if you're Steen, you know guys that have that in them.
Yeah. He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up next, what's the lesson for the Cardinals that they can learn from what's happened to the Blue Jays? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Terry Hendricks here, the Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The big news of the day, the St. Louis Blues announced earlier Doug Armstrong has signed a contract extension to remain as the president of hockey operations through the 2028-29 season, and Alexander Steen will be taking over as general manager in 2026. And if you missed our conversation with the Blues president of hockey operations, Doug Armstrong, check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, or via the free 101 ESPN app. And Alexander Steen will join the Fast Lane at 2 o'clock today. Cardinals currently in action as they are tied 0-0 in the bottom of the second with the Pittsburgh Pirates. This Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
At some point, this is going to end if they don't start getting their acts together. And we've been talking about this, man, since the end of last season. So I don't know that it's the end per se, but certainly this team is one that is in a very interesting position right now, a very precarious position, because if this is a situation where they decide they're going to sell, then it all comes back to the general manager, Ross Atkins, and by extension, the club president, Mark Shapiro. And ultimately, what is their future?
So that was Ken Rosenthal on Foul Territory yesterday with Alex and T-Bone on BK. Alex, I wanted to bring up the Blue Jays today because I think they're instructive to where the Cardinals currently find themselves. The Blue Jays built around potential superstar position players. They had all of the sons of former big leaguers. They had Biggio, they had Bichette, they had Vlad Guerrero Jr. And I was like, damn, this is going to be the next team of this era, right? You looked at the American League East and it was like, okay, this is going to be Toronto's time here for a little while. And it just never was. They get swept in the wild card, the 3 different chances that they had to be able to go to the postseason. This core group of players has won exactly 0 playoff games. And Alex, as you look back at this, Vlad Guerrero became a star. A superstar? I'm not so sure. He had 1 superstar level season, but otherwise he's been a star level player. Bo Bichette has been fantastic, but again, superstar? Probably not. Just a really, really good player that you would love to build around. I don't know if he reached the superstar level status that they were hoping for, though. And Biggio is no longer playing for the Blue Jays to the point that they basically just shipped him off to the Dodgers for a player to be named later. The core group of players didn't work out the way that they were hoping. But the real lesson here, Alex, I think is twofold. One, they didn't support them with enough other core groups of position players that they could add externally. They had the nucleus, they didn't have the connective tissue of the roster. And then 2, it's the same lesson that the Cardinals have been learning in recent seasons. Have you looked at their rotation recently in terms of who the players are that are a part of it? Because it is not homegrown at all. Jose Barrios, Chris Bassett, Kikuchi, Gossman, Manoah was supposed to be a part of their starting rotation this year, but it hasn't worked out for them. In this stretch of time where they've built around the young position players, they have basically just developed Alek Manoah. Everything else is them bringing pitchers from the outside. They have not developed any of these guys internally. So I think that the lesson to be learned from the Blue Jays, and it looks like this is all coming apart at the seams right now, and this will be the end of this era. 1, when you build those position players the way that it appears the Cardinals are right now, you got to support them with the right guys. And 2, you cannot stop that pitching development. That pipeline, if it dries up, it's over. And it's not going to matter how good those position players are.
Yeah, I mean, the first lesson that came to mind for me was you can't hand the keys over to these young guys to be the leader of the pack. Like, you need to surround them with not just a veteran presence, but somebody who has that winning mentality and knows what winning feels like.
Wasn't that supposed to be George Springer?
Yes,
he won a title,
but he got injured.
Yeah.
And if the guy's not around, that's hard to do if he's not the main piece. Like, it just feels like the moment Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette stepped onto the field with the Toronto Blue Jays, it was, you guys are the ones that are taking us to a World Series.
Good point.
And I just don't believe that's the recipe for success. I think you have to have certain guys that know what it takes to win, that can help kind of groom those younger players into that position. And it was always you guys from the start. Like, I look at their roster, 2021 felt like the team that they had that should be able to do it all.
Marcus Semien.
They didn't even make the playoffs that year. Like, you look at their pitching staff, yeah, they have no internal options, but you were locked in from 1 to 6. That was the year they traded for Barrios. And then you had Marcus Semien, you had George Springer. But Springer was hurt. Marcus Semien was there for them the entire season and was okay, but again, those were all guys that were supposed to take them to the promised land, and it just feels like when you're asking a 20-year-old, a 22-year-old, and a 23-year-old, that is a tough thing to do.
Yeah, I think the best teams see either a whole group come up together as complementary pieces and then the stars emerge, or you start off with what the Cardinals were hoping to do and what they're still hoping to do, which is Jordan Walker, you're not the guy right now. You're going to be hopefully our 7-hole hitter, and then in like 3 years, you're ready to take the reins and become the cleanup guy. I think that's where it goes to, because I remember our conversation with Matt Carpenter when he re-signed here in St. Louis. And I remember him bringing up, even with Goldie and Arenado, he said, hey, sometimes you just need a veteran guy that can kind of take the load of what the immediate responsibilities are. And I think that's kind of where it is for the younger guys. You don't want to come up, you're going to get a lot of attention because you are a kind of phenom. You're supposed to be the next superstar in waiting, but you don't want to be the guy that has all the pressure of the world on your shoulders when you are brought up for the first time.
Yep. I just think that I wanted to take a second because it feels like we're at the end of whatever this is. Yeah, the end of the road with this Blue Jays build. And it was super exciting when all of this came together, man. And last year, even going into the postseason, I remember we were talking about it. Who's going to be the team that emerges, right? That is a wild card contender that ends up potentially getting to the World Series. And I said, for me, the Blue Jays could be that team because you look at the star talent. It's like, man, if it comes together, they could have a special month where they just hit the crap out of the baseball and they had really good starting pitching, but all of it came external. And so when you're spending that kind of money on the pitching, you don't have it to go out there and accumulate those connective tissue position players. The guys like Brendan Donovan, they didn't really develop those guys really internally. They never had a center fielder other than George Springer that they could trust. And when George Springer goes down due to injuries, like you're left in a tough spot there. And then they trade the guy that could play it to be able to go get somebody else. So it's a really interesting spot for them. And they are now going to go into a place where they probably are going to have to rebuild again. And that's not an easy way to live. They did the rebuild. It was supposed to work out. It never did. They won exactly 0 playoff games with this core group of players. And now they're potentially going to go back into that rebuild process. This is one of those, the latest edition. It's a cautionary tale for Cardinals fans that continue to tell me, BK, you're wrong about this. You're wrong. Guys, look at the Blue Jays. They did everything that Cardinals fans want. They spent, they developed core position players, and it didn't work. Maybe it would have if they were in the NL Central, but this is another reminder. It doesn't always work whenever you go down that tank route, even if you get it right in the draft. Even if you are able to go to the international market and get the quote-unquote right players, man, this is hard. It's really freaking hard. So be careful what you wish for.
I'm picking up good vibration.
Coming up next, let's get into the BK and Ferrario Rewind. And right now, we're going to give you a chance to score a pair of tickets to see Def Leppard and Journey with Cheap Trick. That is coming up on July 6th. It'll be at Busch Stadium. Tickets are on sale right now. You can check out all the details at 101ESPN.com or on the free 101 ESPN app. Or you can just text in right now at 314-399-9646, and you'll win a free pair of tickets to the show if you are texter number 101 with the correct answer to this question. Earlier today, Alex mentioned, you're not going to be surprised by this, he got frustrated while he was in public. He was... It was about a certain situation, and the person behind him put stuff on blank before Alex was ready for it. Fill in that blank. What did they put their stuff on before Alex was ready for it?
Easy.
If you're texter number 101, you have the correct answer to that question. You're getting that pair of tickets to see Def Leppard and Journey. Coming up next, the Rewind here on 101 ESPN. Coming up in 10 minutes, the Fast Lane will be joined by Alex Steen. They're opening the show with him, so stay tuned. 10 minutes from now, Alex Steen will join the Fast Lane right at 2 o'clock. He is the new future general manager of the St. Louis Blues. He's going to be an advisor for the next couple of seasons. And then starting 2 years from now, he will be the general manager, not only in name, not only in title, Alex, but in terms of the responsibilities as well. That is something that we learned today that I didn't know how that would go over. We had a pretty good idea as to what the announcement was going to be today. We thought maybe it would be something involving this, considering what you saw last night on Twitter. Who was it? Kevin Weeks tweeted out a picture, and they had mentioned that it was something in the front office. So you kind of put two and two together. Okay, Alex Steen, something with the front office makes sense. I didn't know what it was going to mean for him, though. And Doug Armstrong made it very clear when he joined us earlier today as we go into the BK and Ferrario Rewind. This is going to be a situation where Army is just kind of overseeing everything, but he's not running the day-to-day operations 3 years from now. That is going to be Alex Steen's job. He will do, essentially, what you right now view as Doug Armstrong's position. And that is very different than the setup that exists with the president of baseball operations and the general manager over with the Cardinals, for example. That is more just titles. Mo is still the guy that's running the show there. Nothing in responsibilities has really changed. This is different. This will be the GM is the one that is operating the team on a day-to-day basis whenever Steen takes over.
I was listening to an audio cut during our commercial break, and Elliot Friedman was on with Jeff Merrick today on Sportsnet, and Friedman said, like, this is the new general manager operation in the National Hockey League. And he referenced the Columbus Blue Jackets that are doing this. Don Waddell's there now with Rick Nash taking over soon. You're seeing it with Mike Greer and the San Jose Sharks, Danny Briere and Keith Jones with the Philadelphia Flyers. You're seeing a lot of somebody who's been within an organization for a long time take a step back in terms of trying to do everything and allowing the players that have played in the league or guys that have GMI aspirations to step in and take on a new role with them overseeing it all. And I do think that makes a lot of sense. Rather than Doug having to do all of the PR and the press conferences and all of the traveling with the scouting, now it can be focusing on the long-term picture of the Blues. Meanwhile, you have a general manager who Doug believes is going to have a successful career in this position. And I must have missed this quote during the press conference when he basically told Tom Stillman, like, look, let's not miss out on the right guy for the wrong reasons, meaning his inexperience. So the fact that they went with this, a raw player that they feel can lead a team to a championship window, it's no coincidence that he's taking sole responsibility of this team when Doug expects this team to be out of the retool.
I like that they have this succession plan in place. It's ready to go. And I also like that they've announced it to fans. So fans know up front.
Agreed.
This is what the plan is going to be. This is what the timeline looks like for it. Here's how the responsibilities are going to be divvied up. Right now, Army's still very much in charge. It is his offseason. It is his operations. And over the next 2 years, that will remain the case. But there will be more and more responsibilities that are pushed towards Alex Steen over the next couple of seasons as he prepares to take over as the next general manager for the St. Louis Blues. Plenty more on that coming up on the Fast Lane from 2 to 6. Again, Alex Steen will join them coming up at 2 o'clock. Mason Wynn just hit a triple for the Cardinals in their game. It is the bottom of the third inning. It is a scoreless tie. There's a no-hitter taking place right now for Lance Lynn.
Against a not real Major League Baseball team.
No, this one counts. The Pirates are a real Major League Baseball team. The White Sox don't, man.
Well, nobody's done it to them yet.
Okay.
The White Sox don't.
Sure.
They took 2 or 3 from us.
That's right. They did. They're a better team than you.
What if Mason Wynn's just a star? What if he's the guy that we look back on and we look at this year and we're like,
then you can single the team to death.
Well, he just had a triple. So
well, that was, again,
he's got a
against a
AAA
team.
What we're giving him credit for. I love watching the young guys play, man. Right now, I'm enjoying watching Mason Wynn, Alec Burleson, and Nolan Coleman.
It's almost like somebody named Nolan Arenado lit a fire under him in the offseason when he said...
Yeah, he does take credit on all of that.
I know.
He does take credit.
Unbelievable.
For Tanner Hendrickson and Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane has you covered from 2 to 6 right here on 101 ESPN.